Chapter 239. Li Mu was just putting on an act. He glanced at the director and said, "It was you who didn't talk to me properly first." The director wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, "It's just a small case. There's no need to trouble the heavens." "It's not necessary, really not necessary," Li Mu said seriously. "Perhaps it's just a small case to you, sir. But to me, it concerns my sister's innocence and even her life." "Do you think it's not necessary?" The director said awkwardly. "When did you have a sister?" Li Mu said calmly. "I just recognized her as my sworn sister." "Let's talk about it slowly." The director pointed at a constable and said, "Bring a chair for Constable Li." After going through so many things, he completely understood. Li Mu did not purposely go against the old party. Today, he dared to make a scene in the Ministry of Justice and offend the old party. Tomorrow, he dared to offend the new party and strike the disciples of the Zhou family into pieces. He did not belong to any party or power. He was just a reckless young man who did not care about his life. He had no grudges with Li Mu in the past. It was just a small conflict. There was no need for him to risk his life. The constable brought a chair. After Li Mu sat down, the director said, "I was wrong just now. Don't take it to heart, Constable Li. Jiangxia is a student of the academy. The academy has a high status. Without the academy's permission, if the Ministry of Justice detained their student, I would not be able to withstand the pressure from the people, the imperial court, and other parties." Li Mu asked, "Are you going to let such a villain go unpunished because you're worried about offending people?" The director thought for a while and suddenly said, "Luoyang Magistrate Zhang Chun is upright and outspoken. He is not afraid of the powerful. Why don't the Ministry of Justice send this case to the Luoyang government?" "You can do whatever you want," Li Mu said. "Since the Ministry of Justice has already made a judgment, I don't think it's a good idea to pass it on to the Luoyang government. If the files are messed up, wouldn't a simple case become more complicated?" The director of the Ministry of Justice sighed and said, "Your sister is only slightly injured. Why does a Resterly have to offend the academy? The academy is very protective of its own people and has many connections. There is no benefit in offending them." "I'm doing this for your own good." Little Seven tugged at Li Mu's sleeves and whispered, "Brother-in-law, forget it." Li Mu didn't want to let it go, but seeing that Little Seven was about to cry, he could only bring them back first. The director of the Ministry of Justice stood at the entrance of the yamen and waved at Li Mu. "Constable Li, take care." After sending the God of Plagues away, he walked back to the yamen and heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice standing in the courtyard, he bowed slightly and said, "Assistant Minister Zhou." Zhou Zhong asked, "How was it?" The director of the Ministry of Justice let out a long sigh and said, "I understand now. Arrestor Li is a person who can be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. If you were to be tough with him, he would be tougher than you. Moreover, he is not afraid of anyone. Fortunately, he is not in the Ministry of Justice. Otherwise, the Ministry of Justice would be in chaos because of him," Zhou Zhong said. "I'm asking you, what do you think of Li Mu as a person?" The director of the Ministry of Justice thought for a while and said, "I used to think that he was arrogant and annoying. Now I think he is actually quite amazing. The things that he does are things that others don't dare to do." Zhou Zhong smiled and walked into the yamen with his hands behind his back. The director of the Ministry of Justice followed behind him and said, "The case of the Great Music Workshop is just a small case. However, something big happened in Danyang County. The county magistrate of Ani County under Danyang County suddenly died in his home. After the investigation, the Danyang County government found out that he was assassinated." "Assassinated?" Zhou Zhong raised his eyebrows and asked, "What about the county magistrate of Ani?" The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head and said, "I don't know. Sir, you suspect that he is a heartless official who oppresses the people. This caused the righteous people to be dissatisfied and thus caused the death of his life?" Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "It's hard to say whether it's true or not. First, send someone to the Ministry of Personnel to get the resume of the county magistrate of Ani." On the streets of Luoyang, Shaoqi lowered his head and pinched the corner of his clothes. He whispered, "Brother-in-law, you won't blame me, right?" Li Mu sighed and said, "I know that you are doing this for my own good. However, this will only encourage the unhealthy trend in Luoyang." Yin advised Li Mu, "Brother-in-law, you have just arrived in Luoyang not long ago. You don't know how important the academy is in Luoyang and the Great Zhou. For generations, all the officials in the imperial court came from the academy. The people also respect and trust the academy. If you offend the academy, they can easily ruin your future. Xiaoqi and Yin were all thinking for him. Li Mu could not reprimand them. After sending them back to the great music bar, he returned to the government office with Xiao Bai. In the great music lane, the middle-aged woman pointed at their heads and scolded angrily. How powerful do you think my background is? Is the Ministry of Justice a place where you can mess around? Every single one of you has no conscience. Will you only stop after I close my shop and send me to prison? She slapped their butts and said, I am still counting on you to make money. Go back to your rooms. In the future, play a solo in the accord room. Don't close the door. When Li Mu returned to the government office, he saw Zhang Chun pacing back and forth in the yard. Seeing Li Mu return, Zhang Chun asked, Do you have any more pears? Li Mu asked, Sir, don't you think the gong pears are sour? Zhang Chun said, This official likes to eat sour food. Li Mu placed the gong pears in the flask heaven ring. He flipped his hand and a pear appeared in his palm. He handed it to Zhang Chun. Zhang Chun had seen Li Mu's flask heaven magic treasure on the day of Zhou Chuxing's death. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he could not help but sigh at the difference between people. Her Majesty's grace to him was truly meticulous and meticulous, from the moment he was young to the moment he was young. He took the pear and said, Don't be so stingy. Give me another one. Li Mu threw him another one. Zhang Chun did not eat it. He just put it in his sleeve. Li Mu asked, Sir, did anything happen in the imperial court today? It's nothing serious. Zhang Chun recalled and said, Her Majesty wanted to reduce the number of students in the academy. She was opposed by Baichuan and Qingyun Academy. The deputy dean of Baichuan Academy directly scolded Her Majesty in the imperial court. He said that Her Majesty wanted to overturn Emperor Wen's achievements and destroy the accumulation of great Zhou over the past 100 years. He reminded Her Majesty not to become a sinner. Although the academy could not participate in politics, a few of the higher-ups in the academy could attend the imperial court. This was a rule set during the reign of Emperor Wen. Because of their superior status and no interests involved, they could even criticize the emperor when they met a fatuous emperor. This was also the power granted to them by Emperor Wen. Li Mu asked, What did Her Majesty say? Zhang Chun shook his head and said, Her Majesty said nothing. It seemed that Mr. Mei was right. The Empress was indeed a broad-minded and wise ruler. She could still remain silent even after being criticized like this. But even if the Empress could tolerate it, Li Mu couldn't. Since he already knew, he could not pretend that nothing had happened. He had to share the burden of the ruler. The Empress was humiliated. If he did not do something for the Empress, he would be too ashamed to eat the tribute pears she rewarded him. Li Mu thought for a moment and suddenly asked, Sir, if someone attempted to rape a woman, how should he be punished? Zhang Chun asked, Was he stopped midway or stopped by himself? Li Mu said, The woman resisted and attracted others to stop him. Zhang Chun said, The punishment for attempted rape is 100 beatings. Generally, the punishment is more than 3 years and less than 10 years in prison. In serious cases, the punishment is death by beheading. Li Mu said, There was an attempted rape case in Shandu just now. Zhang Chun asked, Did you catch him? Li Mu shook his head and said, No. Zhang Chun glared at him and said, Then what are you waiting for? Go and catch him. Li Mu held a fist and palm salute and said, Yes, sir. Wait. He was about to leave when Zhang Chun suddenly stopped him. He looked at Li Mu suspiciously and asked, Is the person you're talking about a disciple of the Zhou family? Li Mu shook his head and said, No. Zhang Chun touched his chin and said, Then it's the Shao royal family. Li Mu shook his head again and said, No. Is he an influential person in Shendu? No. Is he a disciple of an official of the 4th rank or above? No. Zhang Chun finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, What are you waiting for? Go and catch him. I hate criminals who rape women the most. The imperial court should really change the law and execute all these people once and for all. After a moment, Wang Wu and Li Mu came out of the government office and asked, Boss, where are we going to catch him? Li Mu said, 100 Rivers Academy. Wang Wu was stunned and asked, Where? Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You've lived in Chengdu for more than 20 years. Do you know where Hundred Rivers Academy is?" Wang Wu immediately explained, "Of course I know where Hundred Rivers Academy is. But boss, the academy doesn't allow outsiders to enter. We can't even enter the academy's gate, let alone catch him." Li Mu frowned. The academy was not the Ministry of Justice. There were countless experts there. Breaking into the academy was not much easier than breaking into the ancestral court of Fu Lu School. Li Mu was not arrogant enough to break into the academy. He thought for a moment and turned to walk into the government office. Wang Wu breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that even the fearless boss knew that the academy was not to be trifled with. Soon, he saw Li Mu come out of the government office again, but he had changed his official uniform into a regular one. Wang Wu scratched his head and asked, "Boss, we haven't opened the government office yet. What are you?" After a moment, at the gate of Hundred Rivers Academy. Li Mu had just approached the gate when an old man suddenly appeared in front of him. The old man reached out to stop him and asked, "Who are you? What are you doing at the academy?" The academy was indeed an academy. Even the guards at the gate were in the divine power realm. Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm Jiangzhe's relative. I have something important to tell him." The old man said expressionlessly, "Those who are not students of the academy are not allowed to enter. If you have something to say, I'll pass it on for you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "This is very important. I have to tell him personally. I don't have to enter the academy. I just have to ask Jiangzhe to come out." Chapter 240. After the old man entered the academy, Li Mu waited outside the academy. The Hundred Rivers Academy was located in the southern district of the divine capital. It covered a large area. The road in front of the academy could accommodate 4 carriages at the same time. There was a stone tablet in front of the academy. It was engraved with the words, "100 Rivers to the Sea." It was said that it was written by Emperor One himself. Standing in front of the academy's gate, a magnificent aura hit him in the face. Li Mu wouldn't have such a feeling just by looking at a door. There must be a formation covering the academy. Li Mu waited outside for a quarter of an hour. During this time, students came in and out from time to time. Li Mu noticed that when they entered the academy and walked through the gate, there was an obscure fluctuation of spirit energy on them. Obviously, the gate of the academy was a powerful formation. The students of the academy should have something to verify their identity. If outsiders came close, they would be blocked outside by the formation. Li Mu waited for a while more. The old man he saw just now finally came out with a young student. Jiangzhe looked around but did not see a familiar face. He turned around and asked, "You said that my relative is here. Where is he?" The old man pointed at Li Mu and said, "This person said that he is your relative and has something important to tell you. Why, you don't know him?" "No." Jiangzhe walked in front of Li Mu and asked, "Who are you and why are you looking for me?" Li Mu said, "Your family asked me to bring you something." Jiangzhe was puzzled. "What is it?" Li Mu stretched out his hand. A light flashed and a chain appeared in his hand. There was a collar at the front of the chain. Jiangzhe was still staring blankly at the thing in Li Mu's hand when the collar suddenly opened. It wrapped around his neck and closed again. The shackles of the yamen were partly prepared for ordinary people and partly for demonic ghost cultivators. Although this chain was not a powerful magic weapon, it had no problem locking down low-level demonic ghosts and cultivators of the lower 3 realms. When they were locked by the chain, they could not use their magic power. Jiangzhe's cultivation was only in the soul condensation realm. By the time he reacted, Li Mu had already put the iron chain around his neck. The old man with the divine arts reacted much faster. He noticed that something was wrong and instantly appeared here. He glared at Li Mu and said furiously, "Junior, what are you doing?" Li Mu took out the token on his waist and waved it in front of the old man, saying, "100 Rivers Academy's Li Mu failed to rape an innocent girl. Shandu Yamen arrestor Li Mu, ordered to arrest the criminal." The old man said with a gloomy face, "He's a student of the academy. Let him go immediately." Li Mu snorted and said, "Luoyang is the great Zhou's capital, not the academy's. If anyone breaks the law, the governor's office has the right to punish them." The old man glared at Li Mu and did not say anything more. He reached out to grab the chain in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu grabbed the chain with one hand and grabbed the air with the other. A fulu appeared in his hand. He looked at the old man and said coldly, "Using violence to threaten a public servant and obstructing official business. Even if I kill you in front of the academy today, I won't have to take responsibility." The old man stopped in his tracks and looked at the fulu in Li Mu's hand. He was afraid and did not dare to step forward. There were teachers in the academy who were proficient in the fulu. He knew what the purple cloud thunder charm looked like. The charm's power was not ordinary. If he was hit by it, even if he did not die, he would lose half his life. Seeing the old man retreat, Li Mu dragged Zhang Zhe with the iron chain and swaggered towards the yamen. Zhang Zhe was dragged by Li Mu. His face was full of panic and he shouted, "Save me!" The old man gritted his teeth and went back into the academy. In a classroom in the academy, the gray-haired old man stopped teaching and frowned. "What? You said Zhang Zhe was taken away by the Luoyang Yamen?" The old man said. He said Zhang Zhe was related to a case and wanted to bring him back to the yamen for investigation. The gray-haired old man threw down the book and said angrily, "How dare they? Since when did they have the right to interfere in the academy's matters?" He waved his sleeves and said in a deep voice, "Follow me to the Luoyang Yamen." The Baichuan Academy was not far from the yamen. Li Mu dragged Zhang Zhe on the street and attracted many people's attention. Many people greeted Li Mu every day and were already familiar with him. They approached him and asked, "Constable Li, what crime did this man commit?" Li Mu said, "Attempted rape of a woman. You have to take this as a warning and obey the law." That person quickly said, "We won't do such a thing even if we're beaten to death. This guy is dressed like a dog, but I didn't expect him to be a beast." Another person said, "Look at his clothes. He's definitely not from an ordinary family. I wonder which family he's from in Luoyang." He accidentally fell into Constable Li's hands again. There seemed to be 3 vertical blue ripples on the chest of his clothes. 3 blue ripples. Isn't that the symbol of the Baichuan Academy? Is he a student of the Baichuan Academy? Yes, he's a student of the Baichuan Academy. He's wearing the academy uniform. Li Mu dragged Zhang Zhe away. The people were still talking behind them. The academy had a high status in the hearts of the people. It was a place that nurtured talents for the country. For more than 100 years, the academy's students had contributed a lot to the great show. How can a student of the Baichuan Academy be a rapist? Do you think Constable Li caught the wrong person? The person caught by Constable Li can't be wrong. He provoked the old faction and killed Director Zhou. It's only been a few days. Why is Constable Li at odds with the academy again? What's wrong with the academy? If someone from the academy breaks the law, he has to be punished by the law. I'm worried that the academy will cover for him. The academy is a place that educates and cultivates talents for the country. How can it cover for a rapist? Your worries are unnecessary. How can there be such an academy? Li Mu brought Zhang Zhe back to the government office. Zhang Chun had been waiting in the court for a long time. When he saw Zhang Zhe, he was stunned and asked, "This is the rapist?" Li Mu nodded and said, "That's him." Zhang Chun's face darkened. He said, "He's well dressed. I didn't expect him to be a beast." After snorting coldly, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He muttered, "Why do I find his clothes familiar? I think I've seen them somewhere before." Wang Wu reminded him, "This is the uniform of the Baichuan Academy." Zhang Chun suddenly understood and said, "I remember. When I was still in the Scroll Academy, the students of the Baichuan Academy wore this kind of clothes during the competition of the 4 academies. It turns out that he's from the Baichuan Academy. The Baichuan Academy." Zhang Chun stared at Li Mu with wide eyes and said angrily, "He's from the Baichuan Academy. Why didn't you tell me?" Li Mu said innocently, "Your Excellency didn't ask." Zhang Chun was speechless for a moment. He asked the dignitaries, the old party, and the new party, but he didn't mention the academy. It was not that he didn't think of it, but he thought that even if Li Mu was bold, he should know the status of the academy in the hearts of the officials and the people. Even His Majesty had to respect the academy. Who did he think he was? Could he ride on His Majesty's back? Li Mu said, "Your Excellency Zhang once said that everyone is equal in front of the law. Anyone who commits a crime must be punished by the law. Your Excellency has always been my role model. Do you think that the students of the academy are above the people and can get away with it if they commit a crime? Zhang Chun's old face turned red. He coughed softly and said, "Of course I didn't mean that, but you should at least tell me in advance so that I can be mentally prepared." Li Mu said, "I thought that in your eyes, there are only law-abiding and law-breaking people. There is no distinction between the common people and the students of the academy." Zhang Chun sighed. "But," Li Mu asked, "don't you think so, Your Excellency?" Zhang Chun's expression turned serious. He said, "Of course I think so. Everyone is equal in front of the law. Even the students of the academy must be punished if they are punished." As soon as he finished speaking, several figures walked in from outside. The leader was a gray-haired old man. Behind him were several students who were also wearing the uniform of the 100 Rivers Academy. Zhangzhe looked at the old man with hope on his face. He shouted, "Sir, save me." Zhang Chun walked up to the old man and cupped his fists. He said, "I'm Zhang Chun of the Divine Capital. May I know who you are?" The old man in luxurious clothes said lightly, "My surname is Fong. I'm an instructor of the 100 Rivers Academy." Zhang Chun said, "So it's Sir Fong. I've heard so much about you." The old man in luxurious clothes went straight to the point. "May I know what crime my student has committed for you to detain him in the yamen, Sir Zhang?" Zhang Chun said, "This person attempted to rape a woman. Although he failed, he must be punished by the law." The old man in luxurious clothes said, "Zhang Zhe is a student of the academy. The academy will punish him for his mistake. There's no need for the yamen to do it." Zhang Chun shook his head. "He didn't make a mistake. He broke the law." The old man in luxurious clothes asked, "May I ask if he ever succeeded in raping a woman?" Zhang Chun shook his head. "No." The old man in luxurious clothes said, "If that's the case, how can you say he broke the law?" Zhang Chun didn't explain this time, so the old man thought that he had nothing to say. He grabbed the iron chain around Zhangzhe's neck and pulled with force. The iron chain was torn apart by him. He glanced at Zhangzhe and said coldly, "You disgraceful thing. Scram back to the academy immediately and accept your punishment." Zhangzhe shuddered and quickly stood in the midst of the students. The old man glanced at Zhang Chun and said, "Sorry to disturb you." With that said, he led the group away from the yamen. From beginning to end, Li Mu did not stop them. With his understanding of Zhang Chun, it was hard to say if Zhangzhe had not entered the yamen. Once he entered, it would not be easy for him to leave. Even if he left now, he would have to return sooner or later. This is too much. As soon as the old man left, Zhang Chun pointed at the door and shouted, "How dare they barge into the yamen and kidnap a criminal in broad daylight? Do they have no respect for the law? Does His Majesty even exist? I'll write a memorial to His Majesty." Chapter 241. The longer Li Mu knew Zhang Chun, the more he realized that Zhang Chun had many tricks up his sleeve despite his thick eyebrows and big eyes. If he insisted on not letting Zhangzhe go, the academy's instructor would not dare to snatch Zhangzhe from the yamen. The academy's status was superior, but it did not mean that its students were above the law. The instructor would only dare to take Zhangzhe away if he pretended to be afraid of the academy. When he took Zhangzhe away, he gave the yamen enough reason to do so. But by doing so, he would offend the Baichuan Academy. Li Mu reminded him, "Sir, aren't you afraid of the academy?" Zhang Chun spat and said, "What's there to be afraid of? This is the government office. If I let him take him away so easily, I will lose face. Where will the law and His Majesty's face be?" Li Mu felt that Zhang Chun was going to throw caution to the wind. Lord Zhang, who used to be as timid as a mouse, had now become as hot-headed as Li Mu. What had he experienced? Outside the Luoyang Yamen, the people who were attracted saw the people from the academy barge into the yamen and walk out after a while. Zhang Zhe, who was handcuffed by Li Mu, was also in the crowd and could not help but be shocked. He's out just like that? Raping a woman is such a serious crime. He's out just like that? What else can he do? You know what kind of place the academy is and how many connections they have in the imperial court. Not to mention rape, even murder and arson. As long as the academy protects them, nothing will happen. The people could not understand what they saw with their own eyes. The academy had a high status in the hearts of the people. For 100 years, The academy had been sending talents to the imperial court. Most of the 36 counties in the Great Zhou, including the Luoyang, were governed by the academy's students. The academy had contributed greatly. The 4 major academies in the Luoyang were respected by the people, be it the instructors or the students. They only saw the academy's glory, but rarely saw this side of the academy. The Baichuan Academy. The old man in fine clothes who had returned to the academy looked at Zhangzhe and snorted. He said angrily, "Bastard!" Zhangzhe hurriedly knelt down and said, "Teacher, this student was wrong. This student will never dare to do it again." The old man said, "This old man has saved you this time. If there's a next time, you'll have to fend for yourself." Zhangzhe repeatedly promised, "I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again." The old man coldly looked at him and said, "If you were a bit more diligent in your cultivation, you wouldn't have been so easily taken down by a Jushin officer. Don't go out to drink and have fun. Spend your time on cultivation. If you still can't reach the Jushin level in a year, then get the hell out of the academy." After the old man finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and left. Zhangzhe heaved a sigh of relief and whispered, "That was close." A student beside him smiled at him and said, "Didn't you do this kind of thing smoothly before? How come you almost fell into the gutter this time?" Zhangzhe said hatefully, "It was fine this time. I even went to the Ministry of Justice and still came back. It's all that damned constable's fault. He almost ruined my future. This debt, I'll settle it sooner or later." The student said, "It's just a constable. When you leave the academy next year and get a good position in the divine capital, there will be plenty of ways to kill him." Crepe Myrtle Hall. There wasn't anything important to discuss in today's morning court. After the 6 assistant ministers reported their work, the young female official walked out from behind the curtain and said, "If there is nothing else, then today's morning court will end here." The officials put away their tablets and were about to leave when a voice suddenly came from the back of the hall. "Your Majesty, this official has a memorial." Everyone couldn't help but look at the back. During the morning court, the officials stood according to their ranks. Those standing at the back were usually the lowest-ranking officials. When they came to the court, they were just going through the motions. Very few of them would take the initiative to speak. At the end of everyone's line of sight, at the entrance of Crepe Myrtle Hall, an official in the second last row stood up. It was the first time for most of the officials in the hall to see him. The official took a few steps forward and came to the center of the hall. He bowed and said, "I'm Zhang Chun of the Divine Capital. I have something important to report." When he reported his official position, many people in the hall realized that he was Zhang Chun. The abolition of the silver in lieu of crime was due to the letter he had sent. The children of several officials in the hall had all suffered under his hands. He had only been in the Divine Capital for a few months, but he had been promoted twice. He even had the right to discuss matters in the court. He had stepped on these officials. The young female official stood at the top and said calmly, "Report." Zhang Chun raised his head and said, "Instructor Fong of the Baichuan Academy forced his way into the Yamen 3 days ago and took away a criminal from the Divine Capital Yamen. This case involves the Academy, so I dare not make a judgment. Your Majesty, please make a decision." As soon as he finished speaking, there was an uproar in the court. No one had expected that Zhang Chun would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. He had just proposed to abolish the substitute silver last time, and now he was accusing the Academy. No wonder Li Mu of the Divine Capital Yamen was so arrogant. He had a superior who was even more arrogant than him. It had been so many years since someone accused the Academy in the court. This was the first time. Nonsense. As soon as Zhang Chun finished speaking, an old man wearing a crown stepped forward and said coldly, "I'm an instructor of the Baichuan Academy. How could I do such a thing?" Behind the curtain, a dignified voice said, "Vice President Chen, why do you have to jump to conclusions so early? Whether it's true or not, won't it be clear when Instructor Fong confronts the Divine Capital Yamen?" Vice President Chen said in a low voice, "I'll go back to the Academy and bring Instructor Fong to the palace to confront him." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and disappeared. Zhang Chun immediately said, "Your Majesty, please summon Arrestor Li Mu of the Divine Capital Yamen to the palace. He's in charge of this case. He's more familiar with it than I am. He was there when Instructor Fong brought people into the Yamen yesterday. He can testify for me. After a moment of silence, the person behind the curtain said, Mei Wei, bring Li Mu to the palace. As soon as Mei Wei left, Vice President Chen's figure appeared again. At this time, there was another person beside him. It was the old man in the luxurious robe. The old man bowed to the Empress first. Your Majesty. The young female official said, Instructor Fong, the Divine Capital Yamen said that you brought people into the Divine Capital Yamen 3 days ago and took away a prisoner. Is this true? The old man in the luxurious robe glanced at Zhang Chun, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately said, I did take away a student from the Divine Capital Yamen, but that student didn't break the law. The Divine Capital Yamen ordered people to trick my student out of the academy and forcibly detain him in the Yamen. I heard that I went to the Yamen to rescue him. How can you say that I forced my way in? Zhang Chun sneered and said, Your student raped a woman. I ordered Arrestor Li to go to the academy to arrest him, but he was stopped by the academy. He had no choice but to use a trick to lure the criminal out. Later, you forced your way into the Yamen and took him back to the academy. Is there any falsehood in my words? The old man in the luxurious robe said angrily, My student was just impulsive after drinking. His behavior was a little out of line. The Divine Capital Yamen shouldn't slander me. Zhang Chun asked, Instructor Fong, do you mean that I can only convict your student if he succeeded in his rape? The old man in the luxurious robe did not answer directly. He said, The students of the academy represent the honor of the academy and the future of the imperial court. If you arbitrarily convict them, where will the academy's face go? Zhang Chun said coldly, Is the face of the academy more important, or the dignity of the great Zhou's law more important? The old man in the luxurious robe tried to slander him, but Zhang Chun slandered him with an even bigger accusation. The two of them were at each other's throats in the palace. At this time, footsteps came from outside the palace again. Li Mu, accompanied by Mr. Mei, walked into the palace. This was the first time he came to the place where all the officials were gathered. His gaze swept across everyone's faces, and then he looked up impatiently. Li Mu had been friends with the Empress for a long time, but he had never seen her before. He did not know if she was tall or short, fat or thin, beautiful or ugly. Suddenly being summoned, Li Mu thought that he would be able to see her face. However, he did not expect that there was a curtain between the Empress and the officials. Li Mu stood there and could not see anything. It was not until Mr. Mei poked him that Li Mu came to his senses. He bowed and said, Divine Capital Yamen Constable Li Mu pays his respects to Her Majesty. No need for formalities. A dignified voice came from behind the curtain. Tell me the cause and effect of this case in detail. This dignified voice sounded very familiar to Li Mu, as if he had heard it somewhere before. He thought carefully but could not remember where he had heard it before. It was not until Mr. Mei poked him again that Li Mu came to his senses. He looked up and said, 3 days ago, Jiang Zhe, a student of the Baichuan Academy, was listening to music at the Great Music Lane. He was lustful toward a musician and wanted to rape her. The musician called for help and attracted other musicians, so Jiang Zhe did not succeed. After learning about this case, I was ordered by Lord Zhang to go to the academy to arrest Jiang Zhe. Because I could not enter the academy, I could only use a trick to lure Jiang Zhe out and detain him in the capital Yamen. I did not expect that before the Yamen could detain him, he would be taken away by Instructor Feng. The old man in luxurious clothes said angrily, What do you mean by taken away? When I took Jiang Zhe away, you did not stop me at all. Li Mu said, You are a strong man in the creation realm, and you have helpers. All the constables in the capital Yamen and Lord Zhang were no match for you. How could we dare to stop you? We could only watch you take the criminal away. The chest of the old man in luxurious clothes rose and fell. He said, Didn't you say that if you did not succeed in raping a woman, it was not a crime? Zhang Chun shook his head and said, That was what you said. I did not say that. The old man in luxurious clothes said angrily, Why didn't you say that at that time? Zhang Chun shrugged and said, I told you that he had violated the law, but you did not believe me. You even destroyed the instruments of torture in the Yamen and insisted on taking him away. I was afraid that if I angered you, you would attack me. The old man in luxurious clothes opened his mouth but did not know what to say. He had been in the academy for decades and had never met such a person. This black-hearted official had clearly dug a hole for him to jump into. Chapter 242. Instructor Fong was rendered speechless by Zhang Chun's words. The vice headmaster of the 100 Rivers Academy could no longer sit by and watch. He said, "I believe that the students of our academy would not do such a thing. Your Majesty, please investigate thoroughly and clear the name of our academy." After a short period of silence, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtain. "Since Vice Headmaster Chen has said so, the case will be investigated by the Luoyang government." Vice Headmaster Chen raised his head and said, "Your Majesty, the Luoyang government is suspected of framing the academy. The case should not be handled by the Luoyang government." The Empress thought for a while and said, "Then let the Ministry of Justice investigate." The Minister of Justice stepped out and bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." This was all Li Mu and Zhang Chun could do. Although they had set a trap for Instructor Fong, they could find out whether he had really made a scene in the Luoyang government and snatched Instructor Fong away with a little investigation. It was already the best result that the Ministry of Justice could do a retrial. Li Mu had never thought of bringing down the academy, and it was impossible for him to do so. Overall, the academy's existence had more advantages than disadvantages. Firstly, he wanted to seek justice for Shao Qi, and secondly, he wanted to vent the Empress's anger. Although the academy was a place to educate people and cultivate talents for the country, it should not be above the law. They should not be on the altar in the human world. Jiang Zhe's case was originally a small case that would not affect the academy. However, Instructor Fong had taken Jiang Zhe away from the Luoyang government in public, which had caused a public outcry. It added a stain to the holy and glorious image of the academy. The young female official stepped out and said, "The court is dismissed." There was an etiquette for the withdrawal of the court. The officials respectfully sent the Empress off. The ones closest to the door, the ones with the lowest rank, had to take 2 steps back and wait for the officials in front to leave first. Li Mu and Zhang Chun stood at the door. Countless eyes swept over them. After everyone had left, the two of them slowly walked out of the hall. Li Mu felt a little regretful. It was not easy to enter the palace, but he did not see the Empress's face. There would be no chance next time. In the imperial garden behind the Ziwei Palace, the young female official said, "This magistrate of Luoyang is quite brave. I can't stand the arrogance of those from the academy in the imperial court." Mr. May also said, "Luoyang's Zhang Chun is neither servile nor overbearing. He's a useful person. We should reward him more as an incentive." The young female official frowned and said, "But the speed of his promotion is already very fast. It has never happened in recent years. It is impossible to promote him again." The Empress thought for a moment, then said, "Give him a chest of pears." Mr. May nodded and said, "That's good. There's a box of pears left." The Empress was silent for a moment. Then she asked, "There is only 1 box of tribute pears left?" Mr. May said, "In Jiangyin County, there are only a few mother trees. They were carefully cultivated by the local government. Every year, there are no more than 10 boxes of tribute pears. After they are sent to the palace, they have to give some to the West Palace. There aren't many left." The Empress thought for a moment, then said, "Then give me half a box. No, give me 3. Luoyang government." Zhang Chun looked at the 3 boxes of tribute pears sent from the palace. He bowed excitedly and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Mr. May said, "I hope that Mr. Zhang will continue to do his job diligently and honestly. Don't let Your Majesty down." Zhang Chun said solemnly, "I will remember." After sending off Mr. May, Zhang Chun picked up a tribute pear and took a bite. He said proudly, "This pear is so sweet." After leaving the palace, Li Mu went straight to the great music bar. The Ministry of Justice would definitely ask Shao Qi and the others to investigate the case. He needed to tell them in advance so that they would not panic. When Little Seven heard this, she was clearly worried. She was only a lowly musician and had never experienced such a situation. Li Mu looked at her and comforted her. "Don't worry. I will go to the Ministry of Justice with you. You are the victim. They should be the ones worried." When Little Seven heard this, she finally relaxed. At the same time in the Ministry of Justice, Vice President Chen said to the Minister of the Ministry of Justice, "This matter concerns the reputation of the Academy. I will leave it to you." The Minister of the Ministry of Justice hesitated for a moment and looked up at him. He said, "The behavior of the Academy's students has nothing to do with the Academy. If it is handled impartially, the Academy will not be implicated. If the Ministry of Justice is biased, it will be disadvantageous to the Academy. Vice President Chen, you must think carefully. Vice President Chen frowned. He had just declared that Jiang Zhe was innocent in the court. If the Ministry of Justice overturned it, wouldn't he become a joke? At this moment, the Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong, said, "The Ministry of Justice has the power to decide the case." The girl was not harmed. As long as Jiang Zhe insists that he was rude after drinking and repents, he will be exempted from punishment. Vice President Chen thought for a moment and said, "I still don't believe that the Academy students would do such a bad thing." The Minister of the Ministry of Justice understood what he meant. He meant that the Ministry of Justice would help the Academy regardless of whether Jiang Zhe was guilty or not. He already knew the inside story of this case. With the Ministry of Justice's ability, it would not be difficult to get Jiang Zhe off the hook within the scope of the law. He was from the Baichuan Academy, so he could not refuse. He nodded and said, "Since Vice President Chen has decided, then let's do it." After that, he looked at the Minister of the Ministry of Justice and said, "I'll leave this case to you, Minister Zhou." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Don't worry." Jiang Zhe's case had already caused a certain degree of discussion within a small circle in the past 3 days. In the morning court, the Luoyang ordered Zhang Chun to sue the Academy's instructors. The news that the Empress ordered the Ministry of Justice to reinvestigate the case also gradually spread after the morning court. When people saw that Jiang Zhe was brought to the Ministry of Justice, a large number of people began to gather at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice to watch. Zhu Tsong and Wei Peng, who had been drinking in the fragrance house, were able to enter the Ministry of Justice because of Yang Xiao. They watched from afar in the direction of the court. Yang Xiao said with a serious expression, "The minister rarely judges cases in person." Zhu Tsong asked, "How will Jiang Zhe be sentenced?" "Rape is a serious crime." "I'm afraid the rest of his life is over," Wei Peng said. "Not necessarily." Zhu Tsong knew that Wei Peng had been painstakingly studying the laws of the Great Zhou these days. He turned to look at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Wei Peng said, "In the laws of the Great Zhou, raping a woman is a serious crime. Usually, the offender will be sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. If the case is serious, the offender can be executed. Even if he doesn't succeed in his crime, he will still be sentenced to 3 years in prison for attempted rape." Zhu Tsong asked, "That means Jiang Zhe will spend at least 3 years in prison?" Wei Peng shook his head and said, "This is a case of attempted rape. If he gives up in the process of rape and stops the crime voluntarily, he can be exempted from punishment if he doesn't cause any harm to the woman." He looked in the direction of the court and said slowly, "The key to this case is whether Jiang Zhe stopped the violence voluntarily or was stopped by someone else. This will determine whether he will be acquitted or be sentenced to 3 years in prison." Zhu Tsong was puzzled. "What's the difference if he failed to rape her anyway?" "I know that." Yang Xiao finally had a chance to interrupt. He said, "If he stops the crime voluntarily, he will also be sentenced to a heavy sentence. The perpetrator will have no way out. This law seems to give the perpetrator a chance, but it is actually a protection for the victim." Wei Peng nodded and said, "Although this is the original intention of the law, it will also give many people a chance to take advantage of this loophole. In the court of the Ministry of Justice." Jiang Zhe knelt on the ground and said, "Sir, please understand. I was impulsive after drinking and was rude to this lady. Later, I remembered the teacher's teachings and suddenly came to my senses. I didn't continue to violate this lady," Enin said angrily. "You only stopped when we rushed to the room," Jiang Zhe said. "At that time, I wanted to apologize to this lady." "You misunderstood. You are clearly quibbling." "That is the truth." Jiang Zhe looked up at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice and clasped his hands. "Sir, please understand. Both sides had their own version of the story. Jiang Zhe said that he stopped the violence voluntarily, but the musician of the Great Music Bar said that he was stopped by others. Although the results of these 2 cases were the same, the meaning was completely different. The Ministry of Justice's punishment for this case was based on the process of the case. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice said lightly, "I will use the soul manipulation on Jiang Zhe. The truth will be revealed soon." He looked at Jiang Zhe and said, "Raise your head." Jiang Zhe raised his head and looked into the eyes of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice's eyes became deep pools. He asked, Jiangzhe, let me ask you. When you wanted to violate this lady, did you repent on your own, or was it because someone stopped you? Jiangzhe's eyes were dull. He murmured, I repented on my own and realized that I had made a mistake. I wanted to explain to this lady, but perhaps I was too anxious and was misunderstood by her. Li Mu's expression was ugly. Xiao Qi and the others could not be lying. Either Jiangzhe had a way to avoid the soul manipulation, or the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice deliberately let him go. Regardless of which possibility it was not something that ordinary people could see through. Jiangzhe's actions before he was stopped were attributed to him being too anxious to explain. Even if a transcendent expert could reenact the scene, they could not convict him. It was obvious that he had made sufficient preparations before going to court. Even if the Ministry of Justice's punishment was presented to the Empress, it would not be a problem. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice looked at everyone and said, The truth is out. Although Jiangzhe was in the wrong, he did not deserve to be punished. Seeing that you were able to repent in time, I acquit you. However, you have disturbed this lady, so you must apologize to her and compensate her with 10 taels of silver. Do you have any objections? Jiangzhe immediately said, Thank you, sir, for proving my innocence. He stood up and bowed to Xiao Qi. He said, I was rude after drinking and offended you. I apologize to the lady. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice slammed the gavel and said, The case has been investigated. The court is dismissed. Jiangzhe left 10 taels of silver and looked at Li Mu and the others. He smiled and strode out of the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu sent Xiao Qi and the others out of the Ministry of Justice. He looked back and walked back. He looked at a figure standing in the courtyard and said slowly, Sir Zhou, you should know better than anyone whether Jiangzhe is guilty or not, right? Zhou Zhong looked at him and asked, Is this important? Li Mu said in a low voice, If right or wrong, justice and justice are not important, what else is important in this world? Zhou Zhong looked into his eyes and said after a long time, You are really like a friend that I haven't seen for many years. Li Mu said coldly, You don't deserve such a friend. Zhou Zhong was not angry. Instead, he smiled and said, Young man, when you first came to Luoyang, you thought that you were the embodiment of justice and did not care about anyone. They fought with the rich and powerful, corrupt officials, and the academy. There were many people like you in the past, but now you are the only one. Do you know why? He said to himself, Some people are dead, some are still alive. If the living want to live a better life, they have to become the people they used to hate the most. You will also have such a day, Li Mu said. You can wait and see. Zhou Zhong said, I will wait and see. Li Mu turned around and left in big strides. Zhou Zhong looked at his back and a mysterious smile appeared on his face. Chapter 243. Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong returned to the office and tapped the table with his knuckles. No one knew what he was thinking. The director of the Ministry of Justice knocked on the door and walked in. He put a file on the table in front of him and said, Assistant Minister, I went to the Ministry of Appointments and asked them to make a copy of County Magistrate and Yi's resume. It's here. Zhou Zhong looked forward and his mind seemed to be elsewhere. He asked, Is there a problem? The director of the Ministry of Justice said, This person's resume is an A in every 3 years. However, everyone knows what the Ministry of Appointments resume is about. It's too hard to use it to wipe someone's ass. There's no reference value. Even the county magistrate of Yangyang County can get an A in every year. This county magistrate in E was originally from the Ministry of Appointments. It's normal for the Ministry of Appointments to protect him. If you want to know how an E county is governed, you have to send someone to an E county to see for yourself. Ministry of Appointments? The director of the Ministry of Justice's words seemed to have touched Zhou Zhong. He opened the resume of county magistrate in E and glanced at it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he put down the resume and said, I'll send someone to handle this case. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Danyang County was far away, and it was very troublesome to investigate an E county. The director of the Ministry of Justice didn't want to take care of this troublesome task. He was delighted and said, If that's the case, I'll take my leave first. He strode out of the office. Zhou Zhong looked at the resume of County Magistrate in E for a long time. This resume from the Ministry of Appointments and a case file about the assassination of County Magistrate in E slowly floated up from the table. Puff! A ball of fire suddenly appeared in the air. The resume and the case file were quickly swallowed by the fire. In an instant, they disappeared without a trace. Not even ashes were left. Li Mu walked out of the Ministry of Justice. He was still angry. With his character, he wouldn't have said so much to the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. However, Zhou Zhong used to be a clear stream in Luoyang more than 10 years ago. The law reform he proposed was very advanced even now. Evil people would do evil. This was a fact that had never changed since ancient times. It was a pity and anger that a hero who slayed a dragon became an evil dragon. Li Mu was not Zhou Zhong, so he did not know why Jiangzhe had changed like this. However, the way the Ministry of Justice dealt with Jiangzhe was not entirely a bad thing. If the Ministry of Justice dealt with Jiangzhe fairly, the 100 Rivers Academy would inevitably lose some face. After all, it was shameful for a student of the academy to have such a scandal. This loss of face was negligible. Perhaps it would not be mentioned again in a few days. However, after Jiangzhe committed the crime, he was still able to get away with it under the protection of the academy. This matter would stir up even more public opinion among the people. It was inevitable that the people would look at the 100 Rivers Academy through colored glasses in the future. It had to be said that some people in the academy were used to being high and mighty. That was why they made such a stupid decision. Zhou Zhong wasn't helping the 100 Rivers Academy. He had solved a small problem for the 100 Rivers Academy, but he had also planted a big problem for them. Once the reputation of the academy collapsed, it would not be so easy to rebuild it. If Her Majesty could seize the opportunity, she might be able to change part of the situation in the imperial court. Li Mu felt that he was really worried about Her Majesty. As a lowly official with only a few taels of silver a month, he was worried about the Prime Minister. Outside the Ministry of Justice, the onlookers had not dispersed. A man came forward and asked, "Constable Li, why did Jiangzhe swagger out of the Ministry of Justice? Is he really not guilty?" Li Mu did not speak. He only sighed and said, "The Ministry of Justice has already declared Jiangzhe not guilty. Let's disperse." How could this be? Constable Li, is there any inside story? Isn't it obvious? Don't make things difficult for Constable Li. He has his own difficulties. Who dares to provoke the academy? Constable Li might even lose his position. Constable Li has done so much for us. We have to think for him. The people were very dissatisfied with Jiangzhe's ending. If there was no outside intervention, this dissatisfaction would reach its peak in a short period of time and then slowly fade away. Humans were forgetful. After a few days, if something new happened in Luoyang, these old things would be replaced and forgotten. Li Mu was still brooding over Zhou Zhong's matter. When he returned to the Yamen, he flipped open the law of Zhou and found the laws that Zhou Zhong had advocated. The more he read, the angrier he became. He had advocated the abolition of the silver law of substitution more than 10 years ago. Since the establishment of the Great Zhou, it had pursued the rule of etiquette. Under this rule, the aristocrats and officials enjoyed great privileges. Later, some emperors began to accept the idea of the rule of law, which led to the current situation of rule of etiquette and law. The silver law of substitution was actually to legalize the privileges of the privileged class. Zhou Zhong was resolutely opposed to this practice, thinking that it was an insult to the legal system. The law did not distinguish between relatives and estrangement, high and low. The monarch and his ministers, from top to bottom, high and low, all followed the law. Punishing the wrong did not evade the ministers, rewarding the good did not spare the common man. He wanted to implement a thorough rule of law. In addition, he also pointed out the shortcomings of the academy and suggested that the imperial court should select talents from outside the academy. This could effectively prevent the officials from forming cliques and the academy from interfering in politics. Later he failed. His failure was not surprising. It was because he challenged the officials, the nobles, and the academy. Because of this matter, he was demoted and almost exiled. Seeing this, Li Mu's anger and resentment subsided a little. He could not describe what he was feeling in his heart. Those who held the firewood for the people froze to death in the wind and snow. Those who opened the way for justice died in the thorns. This was the true portrayal of Zhou Zhong. Li Mu did not know what happened later, but it was not difficult to guess based on his current status and power. Zhang Chun strolled in from outside and looked at Li Mu with a proud expression. He asked, "Did His Majesty reward you with anything?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhang Chun smiled and then said regretfully, "His Majesty rewarded me with 3 tribute pears. They were much sweeter than the ones I ate from you. Unfortunately, there were only 3. Otherwise, I would have given you one and let you have a taste." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I still have half a box at home. Sir, you can keep it for yourself." Feeling a familiar breath, Li Mu walked outside and saw Mr. May walking in from outside the yamen. The 2 people behind her moved a big box into the yard of the yamen. Mr. May said to Li Mu, "These spiritual jades are from His Majesty." Li Mu quickly walked forward and opened the box. Seeing that it was full of high-quality spiritual jades, he immediately put them into the flask space. After using up all the spiritual jades he got from the county yamen, he was worried about new ones. He did not expect His Majesty to be so considerate and send them to him so quickly. With these spiritual jades, he and Xiaobai did not have to worry about cultivation resources in a short time. Zhang Chun looked at the box of spiritual jades from afar. He touched the 2 tribute pears in his sleeve and suddenly felt that the one he ate just now was not as sweet as before. Li Mu knew that he was just doing what he was supposed to do. He said embarrassedly, "I didn't do anything wrong." "Why did His Majesty suddenly reward me?" Mr. May said. "How can you hide your thoughts from His Majesty? Are you trying to take the opportunity to make trouble for the Academy so that you can avenge His Majesty?" If he did not know that the Empress was a cultivator of the 7th land who could sit in the palace and know everything in the world with a pinch of her fingers, Li Mu would have thought that she had installed a surveillance camera on him. But since they were talking about this, he could use Mr. May to tell His Majesty his thoughts. Li Mu said, "It's not entirely a bad thing that the Ministry of Justice covered up for Jiang Zhe." The deputy headmaster of the Baichuan Academy dared to criticize His Majesty in front of the court because of the Academy's high status and high reputation among the people and the court. If the Academy loses its reputation, His Majesty can reasonably reduce the number of students from the Academy who can become officials. If such a scandal happens, how can they refute His Majesty? The Academy's high status was because they had sent many talents to the court and the people trusted them. Once the people no longer trusted them, they would naturally lose their high status. As the ruler of the Great Zhou, the Empress had absolute power. In principle, as long as she wanted to do something, there was nothing she could not do. However, if she acted arbitrarily and did not care about the opinions of the Academy and the officials, it would not be good for maintaining the stability of the court and gathering the people's support. All she needed was a reason. If the Empress took advantage of this and made a fuss, the Academy would lose more than just trust and status. Mr. May's eyes flashed with a strange light. He said, "You're right. I'll go to the palace and report to His Majesty." Before she left, Li Mu added, "Remember to remind His Majesty that the impact of Jiangzhe's incident is limited. The Baichuan Academy has been in Luoyang for hundreds of years and will not lose its reputation so easily. The people will soon forget about this unless someone is fanning the flames and pushing the Baichuan Academy to the cusp of the storm." In the palace. In a hall. The space in the hall fluctuated and the figure of Mr. May appeared out of thin air. Her body began to change, gradually turning into another figure. She looked at the real Mr. May and said, "You're right. He is indeed loyal to me and smart. If he were in the court, I would feel much better. Think of a way to get him to my side." Chapter 244. With enough spiritual jades, Li Mu used the 3 days of rest he had saved to cultivate in seclusion at home. At a certain moment, Li Mu, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed and absorbing the spiritual jades with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He could sense some subtle fluctuations in the array formation outside. Li Mu opened the door and saw Mr. May standing outside. He asked in surprise, "Sister May, why are you here?" Lord May went straight to the point and asked, "Were you the one who added fuel to the fire in the 100 River Academy?" Li Mu had been in seclusion for the past 3 days, so he didn't know anything. He asked, "What happened in the 100 Rivers Academy?" Mr. May was puzzled. "It really wasn't you?" Li Mu said, "Tell me what happened first." Lord May looked at him in surprise and finally said, "After Jiangzhe's case, in just 3 days, the reputation of the 100 River Academy among the people plummeted. After the internal guards investigated, they found that someone was fanning the flames behind the scenes and adding fuel to the fire. "Wasn't it you?" Li Mu said, "I've been in seclusion for the past 3 days. This is the first time I've heard of this. Wasn't it His Majesty who sent someone to do it?" Mr. May shook his head and said, "No." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "Then who could it be?" The gate of the 100 Rivers Academy was not on the bustling main street, so not many people passed by. But since 3 days ago, there had been more people passing by the gate of the academy. When the people passed by the gate of the 100 Rivers Academy, they all cast disdainful looks at the academy. Some people even secretly spat when no one was paying attention and quickly left. Li Mu and Mr. May stood in the distance and watched this scene. The development of the matter was far beyond Li Mu's expectations. Jiang Zhe's crime didn't cause any serious consequences, so it shouldn't have escalated so quickly. Someone must have fanned the flames behind the scenes to be able to develop to this point within 3 days. Under normal circumstances, this kind of thing should be decreasing day by day. For this kind of situation to occur, someone must have bought the trending topic. Li Mu thought about it and asked, could it be done by other academies or the new party? Although the Baichuan Academy did not openly support the old party, the students of the academy were the most influential in Great Zhou. Their relationship with the old party was inseparable. Of the 4 great academies, other than the White Deer Academy, the other 3 academies were in a competitive relationship. After all, there was a limit to the number of vacancies in the royal court. If one academy had more vacancies, the other academies would have fewer vacancies. Nobody wanted to be the one with fewer vacancies. The Baichuan Academy was close to the old party, while the Zhou family and the other new party members were eager to get hold of their weakness. They had the most obvious motive. Mr. May shook his head and said, "The person behind this is very cautious. The internal guards can't find the source. Even His Majesty couldn't figure it out with his great supernatural powers." She continued, "The Baichuan Academy's behavior of protecting Jiang Zhe has already caused public anger in Luoyang. In the morning court today, several imperial censors joined with many courtiers to impeach the Ministry of Justice and the Academy. His Majesty has already ordered the Imperial Censorate to investigate this case." No matter who was behind this, Li Mu had to give him a thumbs up. It seemed that someone had the same idea as him. Instead of doing it secretly, it was better to let them fight each other. It would save Her Majesty a lot of trouble. Mr. May shook his head and said, "I almost forgot. I came to see you today for an important matter." She took out a silver waist token and handed it to him. She said, "From today onwards, you are a member of the internal guards." Li Mu looked at the waist token with his name engraved on it and was overjoyed. After being in Luoyang for so long and worrying so much for Her Majesty, he finally succeeded in sneaking into the internal guards. The internal guards were Her Majesty's direct imperial guards. They were only responsible for Her Majesty. This meant that he was one step closer to that big thigh. Mr. May continued, "Other than being an internal guard, you have a new job." Li Mu asked, "What job?" Mr. May said, "Her Majesty wants you to be the imperial censor in the palace. You will be in charge of checking the officials in the morning court." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "Don't you have to be from the academy to be an official?" Mr. May explained, "The officials of the Imperial Censorate are chosen by the Imperial Court from each county. They are not afraid of power and are honest and upright. In order to prevent the Imperial Censors from forming cliques for personal gain, all officials of the Imperial Censorate cannot be from the academy." Compared to the ability to govern the country, the Imperial Court valued the character of the Imperial Censor more. The cleaner the background, the more upright he was. He would be more suitable to be an Imperial Censor if he dared to speak out and scold other officials. The Imperial Censor in the palace, as the name suggested, was an Imperial Censor who worked in the Golden Palace. Their job was to observe the officials in the morning court to see if they were disheveled, lazy, or otherwise impolite. In addition, they had the right to express their opinions on the Imperial Court. All the officials in the Imperial Court, no matter their rank, had the right to discuss the Imperial Court's affairs. Becoming the Imperial Censor in the palace had little impact on Li Mu's current life. He was still the arrestor of the Luoyang Yamen, but he had to appear in the palace every time he attended the court. He stood in the corner of the palace and observed secretly. Li Mu was confused and asked, "Why did Her Majesty suddenly want me to be an Imperial Censor?" Mr. May said, because you are not afraid of the nobles or the academy. She dares to speak out. Her Majesty needs you to speak out in the imperial court. Li Mu nodded and said, I understand. Baichuan Academy. An old man pointed at Vice President Chen and said angrily, Are you stupid? You ruined the Academy's century-old reputation in order to protect a guilty student. You have to apologize to the Academy's past sages. Vice President Chen's face also darkened. He said, This was originally a small matter. It shouldn't have escalated to this point. Someone must have added fuel to the fire. The old man said angrily, If you had done things impartially, how could you have been caught? Vice President Chen said, I want to know who set us up. This started with the Luoyang prefect Zhang Chun. I have already investigated. Zhang Chun was once a student of the Myriad Scroll Academy. Could this be a trap set by the Myriad Scroll Academy? The old man said, This is not important. For now, the most important thing is how to restore the Academy's reputation. Even the headmaster, who was in seclusion, was alerted. The headmaster has already ordered Jiang Zhe to be expelled from the Academy, and Feng Bo to be stripped of his teaching qualifications. No one is allowed to plead for them in the imperial court. Vice President Chen looked regretful. He gritted his teeth and said, I understand. Ziwei Palace. 3 days ago, the imperial censor was ordered by the Empress to investigate Jiang Zhe's case. After 3 days of questioning and investigation, the imperial censor finally found the origin of the case. When Jiang Zhe was listening to music at the Great Music Bar, he was lustful towards a beautiful musician in a private room and wanted to violate her. The musician of the Great Music Bar could not bear the humiliation and cried for help. In the end, other musicians were alerted. They broke into the room and stopped Jiang Zhe. It was not as Jiang Zhe said, that he regretted it during the process of violating the musician. The Ministry of Justice misjudged the case because when Jiang Zhe was being tried in the Ministry of Justice, he had a magic weapon given to him by his teacher, Feng Bo. This magic weapon could keep one awake when one's soul was being controlled, thus misleading the officials of the Ministry of Justice. After Jiang Zhe committed the crime, he refused to confess and misled the Ministry of Justice, causing the case to be misjudged. This caused an extremely bad influence in Luoyang. According to the law, Jiang Zhe was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His cultivation was abolished and he would never be employed again. Behind the curtain, the Empress asked Vice President Chen coldly, Does the Baichuan Academy have any objections? Vice President Chen lowered his head and said, Feng Bo and Jiang Zhe have deceived the Imperial Court and the Academy. The Baichuan Academy has already expelled Jiang Zhe from the Academy and stripped Feng Bo of his teaching qualifications. The Imperial Censor has passed the judgment according to the law. The Academy has no objections. The Empress said in a dignified voice, Jiang Zhe's case has caused a bad influence. The Academy cannot escape the blame. This year, the quota for students of the Baichuan Academy to become officials will be reduced by half. Vice President Chen's lips moved, but he did not speak in the end. Such a scandal had happened in the Academy. At this moment, he had no face to refute. Chapter 245. It was rare for the Academy to lower its head in court, but the Empress didn't stop there. The Empress's voice continued to come from behind the curtain. For more than 100 years, all the officials in Great Zhou, from the imperial court to the counties, have been taken over by the Academy. From the Baichuan Academy, it can be seen that the students of the Academy need to be improved. There are also stubborn problems within the Academy. I think it's debatable whether all the officials in the imperial court will be produced by the Academy in the future. As soon as the Empress said this, all the officials were shocked. Her Majesty had long wanted to change the status quo of all the officials in Great Zhou coming from the Academy. She obviously wanted to use the Baichuan Academy's incident as a pretext to make a fuss. Immediately, a few people stood up and objected. Your Majesty, you can't do that. The Academy was created by Emperor Wen. The 4 academies have maintained Great Zhou's stability for 100 years. Once it's changed, it will inevitably cause turmoil in the imperial court. Outside Great Zhou, the demon nation is watching covetously, and the ghost realm is not peaceful. The other nations seem to be obedient, but they all have their own agendas. Within Great Zhou, there is also a demon sect that often causes trouble. If the imperial court is in turmoil, it will inevitably give them an opportunity. If your majesty insists on doing things your own way, you may cause great Zhou to fall into a quagmire, and your majesty will also become a sinner. The people who spoke were all from the Baichuan Academy, Qingyun Academy, and Myriad Scroll Academy, including Vice President Chen of the Baichuan Academy. The other two academies were happy to see the Baichuan Academy's reputation being damaged. But in the face of this matter, the three academies maintained a tacit understanding. The Empress didn't respond to the people from the academy. Instead, she asked, "What do you think?" The imperial court was silent. Although there were some disadvantages to the academy's existence, on the whole, the advantages definitely outweighed the disadvantages. Since the time of Emperor Wen, the academy had been in existence for 100 years. It had continuously sent talents and played a very important role in maintaining the stability of Great Zhou. Her Majesty wanted to remove the Academy's privileges because she wanted to break the situation in the imperial court and concentrate power in her hands. This would completely overturn the situation established by Emperor Wen. No one could predict the future of Great Zhou. For most of the officials in the imperial court, the position of the Empress did not last long. The throne of the Great Zhou would eventually be handed over to either the Shao clan or the Zhou clan. While the Empress was on the throne, it was not suitable for bold and decisive reforms, which would be detrimental to the stability of the country. After the Empress spoke, none of the officials responded, and the atmosphere in the hall gradually became awkward. This was not the first time such a thing had happened. After all, almost all the officials in the imperial court were from the academy. Even the censors did not want to change the ancestral system that had been passed down for hundreds of years. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the corner of the hall. "Your Majesty is wise." Amidst the silence, a voice suddenly rang out, causing the hearts of the officials to tremble. Who was this audacious person who dared to speak at this time? They all looked at the corner of the hall, and a figure walked out from the corner. Li Mu? It's him. Why is he here? Wait, is he wearing the imperial censor robes? Imperial censor? His Majesty made him an imperial censor? Li Mu met the gazes of the officials and walked out from the corner of the Golden Hall. After someone responded, the Empress asked again, "What do you think, Minister Li?" The way the Empress addressed Li Mu made all the officials in the imperial court dumbfounded. Her Majesty had always addressed the officials in the imperial court as Minister Zhang, Minister Li, and other ministers. When had she ever used Minister Li? This special form of address clearly indicated that this newly promoted imperial censor was a trusted aide of Her Majesty the Empress. Li Mu walked to the center of the hall, cleared his throat and said, "Your Majesty is wise. I also think that the academy system established during the reign of Emperor Wen was a great policy 100 years ago. To a large extent, it changed the chaos of the Great Zhou officials who were not talented and virtuous. In the past 100 years, the Great Zhou has been developing continuously. This system can no longer meet the needs of the imperial court. The atmosphere in the hall was completely different from the past. In the past, if no one responded to the decrees proposed by the Empress, it would be ignored, and no officials would discuss it. As long as one official stood out and agreed with the Empress, it was necessary to discuss this topic. The situation in the imperial court was complicated, and no one could predict the future. The officials who could be in the imperial court were all experienced and cunning. No one would risk the Academy's condemnation in order to protect His Majesty and give His Majesty a way out. They had never seen such a bold person. Now they saw it. The people of the Academy naturally would not allow Li Mu to slander the Academy. Vice President Chen said, "You are just an imperial censor. How dare you speak so arrogantly? The Academy has provided so many talents to the imperial court every year. Why can't it meet the imperial court's needs?" Talents? Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "A talent like Zhang Zhe, relying on the Academy's background, raped a woman in broad daylight. Is this the talent the Academy mentioned?" This matter had become a pain for the Academy. Vice President Chen said with a gloomy face, "This kind of bastard is just a special case. He can't represent the Academy. The Academy has expelled him and will never hire him again." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Instructor Fong, as an instructor of the Academy, did not set an example and strictly restrain his students. Instead, he allowed Zhang Zhe to rape a woman and tried to deceive the imperial court afterward to cover up his crime. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. What kind of students can such an instructor teach? If such a student enters the imperial court and becomes an official, how many people will be bullied by him? He said coldly, the instructor is like this, the students are like this. His Majesty just pointed out the shortcomings of the academy. What right do you have to scold His Majesty as a sinner? Vice President Chen was speechless for a moment, and then immediately said, Instructor Feng can't represent all the instructors of the academy. You are generalizing. What about the county magistrate of Yang County? Li Mu continued to ask. As a county magistrate, he colluded with the local tyrants and exploited the people. He created an unjust case that shook the great show. Even the heavens couldn't stand it. Which academy did he come from? The vice president of the Myriad Scroll Academy lowered his head slightly. Vice President Chen said, You are still generalizing. There are 36 counties in the Great Zhou and hundreds of county magistrates. What can a county magistrate of Yang County prove? Li Mu smiled at him and said, Okay, let's not talk about the place. Let's talk about Shendu. As far as I know, the county chief of the North County has long disliked the county magistrate of Yang County's actions. He has submitted many memorials, but the evaluation of the county magistrate of Yang County by the Ministry of Personnel every year is A+. Because of this, the county magistrate of Yang County is even more unscrupulous and can do whatever he wants. This kind of corrupt official can be A+, the highest grade. Are the officials sent by the academy to the Ministry of Personnel all blind and deaf? The Minister of Personnel's face was livid. The faces of the officials of the Ministry of Personnel also alternated between green and white. In front of His Majesty and hundreds of officials, they could only endure being scolded in their noses. This was because what he said was the truth. The county magistrate of Yang County was the brother-in-law of the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The Assistant Minister had personally instructed, so who would dare to make things difficult for him in the evaluation? The officials were silent. Who didn't know about the problems of the Ministry of Personnel? Who didn't know? But the problem was, which Ministry of Personnel wasn't like this in the past dynasties? Most of the officials in the imperial court had their own factions. Wasn't it common for members of the same faction to help and cover for each other? The Ministry of Personnel controlled the evaluation and promotion of officials in the Great Zhou. It was normal for them to give the brother-in-law of the Assistant Minister of Personnel an A+. But in the imperial court, this was the first person who dared to scold the officials of the Ministry of Personnel as blind and deaf. Before this, they all thought that Li Mu was influenced by Zhang Chun of Shendu like boss, like subordinate. Only now did they realize that they seemed to have gotten it the other way around. The Minister of Personnel's face was red. He coughed lightly and explained, This is the dereliction of duty of the Ministry of Personnel. This has already sounded the alarm bell for the Ministry of Personnel. We will reflect on ourselves in the future to reduce such incidents. Don't give me that. Li Mu waved his hand and said, Who doesn't know that the county magistrate of Yang County is the brother-in-law of the Assistant Minister of Personnel? This isn't the first time the Ministry of Personnel has done something like this. Why are you still pretending in front of me? The Minister of Personnel covered his mouth and coughed uncontrollably. He retreated to his seat. The Assistant Minister of Personnel clenched his fists tightly. The veins on his forehead bulged, but he could only lower his head. Many of the officials in the imperial court were dumbfounded. They couldn't help but label Li Mu as a lunatic. Even the strongest imperial censor they had seen was not half as strong as him. He had torn down the veil of the Ministry of Personnel and exposed the officials of the Ministry of Personnel completely naked in front of the other officials. But Li Mu didn't stop there. He pointed around and said, And the Ministry of Rights, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Revenue, and Taichung Temple. How many officials in the 6 ministries and 9 temples have failed to discipline their sons? You let them do whatever they want in Luoyang and bully the people. Instead of being ashamed, you are proud of it. Don't you know how many times you have protected them? The Minister of Justice secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he didn't fight to the death with Li Mu. Instead, he chose to build a good relationship with him. Otherwise, he might have been called out by Li Mu in the Golden Palace like the Assistant Minister of Personnel. Li Mu looked at the people from the academy and said, These are the talents that the academy sent to the imperial court. Are you going to say that these are special cases? Then you have too many special cases. Vice President Chen and the others were finally speechless. This had just happened in Luoyang. Li Mu's subordinates had beaten up many officials' sons. He even forced the officials involved to change the silver law of substitution. The officials were silent. Li Mu continued, "I won't say more. The officials from the academy have formed cliques in the imperial court and are hostile to each other. Can't you see that?" His loud voice echoed in the Golden Palace. Even the giants standing at the front couldn't help but notice him. Because he was too talkative and dared to say it. He had broken the rules that the officials had tacitly agreed to. He had exposed the things that the officials wouldn't normally talk about. He had torn down the veil of the entire imperial court. Throughout history, those who dared to break the rules like this had all died without a complete corpse. Li Mu scanned the faces of the people from the academy one by one and said, "Look at what you have done. His Majesty is wise and has the world in mind, but you only think about your own interests. What right do you have? What right do you have to reprimand His Majesty? Don't you feel ashamed when you reprimand His Majesty?" Chapter 246. There were more than 100 officials standing in the Golden Hall, but it became Li Mu's personal performance. Because it was too quiet, his voice kept echoing in the hall. No one could answer his question. These rules, which had been tacitly agreed upon by the officials, were laid bare in front of them. It was enough to make everyone in the imperial court blush with shame. The officials were silent, and so was the academy. Li Mu continued, talking about the demon kingdom, the ghost realm, the 4 barbarians of the devil sect. These are all excuses. Everyone here knows better than anyone else that the problem of the great Zhou dynasty is not outside, but in the imperial court, in this golden hall. Li Mu's voice echoed, each word piercing the heart. The hall was silent for a long time. Then the Empress's dignified voice came from behind the curtain. "Everyone, please think about Minister Li's words carefully. You may leave the court in an hour." Behind the curtain, footsteps sounded and gradually faded away. The Empress must have left from the back of the hall. After a while, Mr. May walked out from the back of the hall. He gave Li Mu a look, and Li Mu followed him out from the back of the hall. Inside the main hall, there was silence. The Assistant Minister of Personnel's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The officials from the 6 ministries and 9 temples who had suffered at his hands did not look too good either. The vice-deans and instructors of the major academies left without a word. The officials looked at each other. The hall was silent for a long time. Then someone sighed and said, "Where did this hothead come from?" After someone spoke, the oppressive atmosphere in the hall exploded. "He really dares to speak. Ha! The 6 ministries and 9 temples, and the 4 great academies, have all been scolded by him. Even His Majesty has not scolded us like this. With this kind of person as the imperial censor, I'm afraid we won't have a good life in the future. He keeps saying that His Majesty is wise and magnanimous. He just wants to gain favor by protecting His Majesty. Can he be any more obvious? How shameless. I used to think that Zhang Chun was already shameless enough. I didn't expect Zhang Chun to be so much worse than him." The official who spoke did not hide his disgust and annoyance towards Li Mu, but there were also some who were silent and had a thoughtful look on their faces, as if they were really thinking about what he had just said. There was something wrong with the imperial court. They usually turned a blind eye to these problems, but now that it was pointed out, they could no longer ignore it. Li Mu pointed out the problems of the academy, the 6 ministries, the collusion of the officials in the imperial court, and the decreasing psyche power of the people after Emperor Wen. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong, stood in the crowd with a faint smile on his face. Li Mu was not aware of the situation in the hall. He had already left Ziwei Hall. Lady May and the Empress Personal Maid led him to another hall. There was a table in the hall that was already filled with delicacies. Li Mu was startled and asked, "What is this?" Mr. May said, "His Majesty specially asked you to have lunch before you leave." After the morning court session, being able to enjoy lunch in the palace was a privilege that couldn't be any better. Li Mu did not refuse. He was already thirsty from all the saliva flying in the hall. He picked up the flagon on the table, poured himself a full cup, and drank it up. It did not seem to be wine in the flagon, but some kind of fruit drink. It even contained rich spiritual qi. One sip was equivalent to half a spiritual jade absorbed by Li Mu. After he sat down, He looked at Mr. May and the young maid standing aside and said, "Don't just stand there. Sit down and eat with me." Mr. May shook his head and said, "You eat. This is a gift from His Majesty." Since they did not want to, Li Mu did not force them. There were many rules in the palace, and they must know better than him. Mr. May remembered something. He pointed to the young maid and said to Li Mu, "Her name is Shangguan Li. She is His Majesty's personal maid and also one of the commanders of the internal guards. All the internal guards in the palace are under her command. You are on duty in front of the hall, so you are also her subordinate. If you have any problems in the future, you can go to Commander Shangguan." Shangguan Li's initial prejudice against Li Mu had disappeared without a trace. She looked at Li Mu lightly and said, "Just call me boss." Li Mu saluted her with his fists and said, "Greetings, Commander Shangguan." Shangguan Li glanced at him and left. The word boss had a special meaning to him. Li Mu would not call her that casually. This Commander Shangguan was at most a few years older than him, but she also had the cultivation of the fifth realm. It must be because she was the Empress' personal maid. Her Majesty the Empress was so generous. If she could become her personal little jacket, she would definitely receive many benefits. She was able to advance to the creation realm at such a young age. Sooner or later, Li Mu would replace her position and become the Empress' closest jacket. Mr. May walked to Li Mu's side and asked, "Do you have any conflicts with Ali?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "It was the first time I saw her. But before the morning court, she looked at me with an unfriendly gaze." Lord May knew the reason and said, "Maybe it's because you weren't familiar with each other at that time. You're all His Majesty's internal guards and you're his subordinate. You'll get to know each other better in the future." After Shangguan Li left, the atmosphere in the hall became much better. Li Mu smiled and said to Lady May, "Sister May, why don't you sit down and eat with me? I can't finish all these by myself. Besides, I have some questions to ask you. It's not convenient for us to talk if you're standing and I'm sitting." Mr. May had to sit down and asked, "What questions do you have? Ask away." Li Mu remembered the scene in the court where the Empress was alone and helpless. He asked, "Doesn't Her Majesty have her own confidants in the court?" Mr. May said, "Since the time of Emperor Wen, all the officials in the Great Zhou, except for the Imperial Censor, came from the 4 academies. Even the Emperor could not violate the rules set by Emperor Wen. The officials from the 4 academies were united in the court. As long as this rule was not abolished, it would be difficult for Her Majesty to have any confidants. Most importantly, Her Majesty did not want the throne, and she did not want to cultivate any confidants. If it were not for the conflict between the old and new parties, which has affected the psyche power of the people of the Great Zhou and hindered the condensation of the Emperor's qi, Her Majesty would not have cared about them at all." Li Mu remembered that Mr. May once said that the Empress did not become the Empress by her own will. She was just a transition for the Zhou family to take over the court. If she really wanted to take power, her strength was enough to suppress the entire court, even with the restrictions of the academies. In this world, all the intrigues and schemes were not worth mentioning in the face of strength. This was also the only reason why the Empress did not encounter any resistance when she inherited the throne. Even though her surname was Zhou, even the Shao royal family acquiesced to it. Li Mu asked curiously, "Does Her Majesty want to pass the throne to the Shao family or the Zhou family in the future?" Mr. May shook his head and said, "I'm afraid only Her Majesty knows about this. Let's not ask more." She looked at Li Mu and said, "You are much braver than I thought. Most people can't even stand steadily in front of hundreds of officials for the first time, let alone point at their noses and scold them like you. Just now, you finally helped Her Majesty vent her anger." Li Mu did not care at all. He said, "I have Her Majesty behind me. What am I afraid of?" Mr. May patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry. As long as you are loyal to Her Majesty will not mistreat you." Li Mu's protection of the Empress was based on the fact that she would not mistreat him. As long as the Empress did not mistreat him, he could naturally guarantee his loyalty to her. Flattering her in court and protecting her image were all small things. In the future, Li Mu would use practical actions to tell her that as long as he had enough spiritual jade, there were still many things he could do. Li Mu did not finish the delicacies given by the Empress. Before he left, he also brought some fruits and pastries for Xiao Bai. Mr. May said. Let me see you out. This place is very close to the West Palace. You can't wander around. If you offend the concubines of the previous emperor, Her Majesty will be in a difficult position. Li Mu was escorted out of the harem by Mr. May. When he passed by Ziwei Palace, he happened to see hundreds of officials coming out of the palace. Li Mu was walking behind. When he saw Zhang Chun, he hurriedly said, Sir Zhang, wait for me. Hearing the familiar voice behind him, Zhang Chun's footsteps quickened. Li Mu quickly caught up with Zhang Chun and said, Sir Zhang, why are you walking so fast? Zhang Chun hurriedly said, No, Sir Li, don't call me sir in the future. I can't accept it, really. The imperial censor in the palace was only a 7th-rank official. Zhang Chun was now a 5th-rank official. Moreover, Li Mu's identity was only useful during the morning court. Normally, he was still a constable in the divine capital. However, since Zhang Chun said so, he did not force him. He said, Old Zhang, what are you afraid of? Zhang Chun looked at him and said in shock, Are you really stupid or are you pretending to be stupid? After what you did in the court, there will be no place for you in the divine capital. You may not be afraid of them, but I'm afraid of being implicated by you. Li Mu said, I don't need them to tolerate me. I only need Her Majesty to tolerate me. He glanced at Zhang Chun and asked, Besides, do you think it's useful for you to hide from me now? Zhang Chun thought carefully and realized that he and Li Mu were grasshoppers in the same boat. He sighed and asked, You disappeared for so long just now. Did Her Majesty summon you alone? No, she didn't. Li Mu shook his head and said, Her Majesty told me to have lunch in the harem before leaving. I came out after lunch. Lunch? Zhang Chun licked his lips and asked, How's the lunch in the palace? Is it rich? How many dishes are there? Li Mu said, It's quite rich. There are more than 30 dishes. The spirit wine is also delicious. One sip and the wine is wrapped in spirit qi. Zhang Chun's throat moved. He turned his head and said, I heard that the imperial kitchen's cooking is not that good. I still prefer the home-cooked food my wife makes. Li Mu felt the same. He said, I also like the food my wife makes. Zhang Chun was stunned. You have a wife? Li Mu nodded and said, You met her in Yangqiu County. She's Lady Lu from the Yunyan Pavilion. However, she's still in the North County and won't come to the divine capital until a few days later. Zhang Chun had a deep impression of the beautiful manager of the Yunyan Pavilion. He sighed and said, Why do all the good things happen to you? Li Mu was taught and influenced by Li Si. He said, As long as a girl puts down her face, it's easy to get her. Zhang Chun thought of his performance in the palace and nodded. You're quite shameless when you're protecting Her Majesty. Then he suddenly thought of something and looked at Li Mu in disbelief. Chapter 247. Zhang Chun suddenly felt that he had unwittingly discovered a huge secret. The Empress had ascended the throne for 3 years, but she had never revealed who she would pass the throne to. The Shao clan and the Zhou clan. One was the original royal family of the Great Zhou, while the other was the Empress's maternal family. According to everyone's guess, after the Empress abdicated, either the Shao clan would regain power or the Zhou clan would replace her. The officials in the court would be led by the Shao clan and the Zhou clan, and they would fight for the throne. The only thing they didn't expect was for the Empress to have other plans. Why would Her Majesty pass the throne to the Shao clan? To the Empress, the Shao clan was an outsider and had no blood relations with her. A married daughter was like spilled water. She was no longer a member of the Zhou clan. What good would it do her to pass the throne to the Zhou clan? The Zhou clan's blood relations with her would become weaker and weaker. Who knew what they would think of her in the future? Instead of passing the throne to an outsider, why not give birth to one herself? Wouldn't it be better for her own children to inherit the throne than outsiders like the Zhou clan and the Shao clan? With this bold assumption in mind, Zhang Chun began to speculate. If Her Majesty wanted to pass the throne to her children, what was the biggest obstacle? The Shao clan and the Zhou clan were nothing to be afraid of. Her Majesty herself was a transcendence expert, a 7th realm transcendence expert. She was the strongest existence in the 10 continents. The legendary 8th realm and 9th realm only existed in legends. The 7th realm was the peak of the world. If Her Majesty insisted on having her way, Who could stop her from the Shao clan and the Zhou clan? The only thing that could restrain Her Majesty was the Academy. Not only did the Academy have transcendent cultivators, but the officials in the court also came from the Academy. It would be difficult for Her Majesty to subdue them. That was why Her Majesty wanted to weaken the Academy's position in the court, and why she wanted to reduce the quota for the Academy. Connecting the dots, Zhang Chun knew that he had discovered the truth. The last problem was that Her Majesty had no children. Although she was the crown princess and the empress, it was said that the former crown prince liked men and was only husband and wife on the surface. After ascending the throne, Her Majesty didn't establish a harem. Who did she want to have children with? Zhang Chun's gaze involuntarily turned to Li Mu. Her Majesty's love for Li Mu and her meticulous love for Li Mu was something that even he couldn't bear to see. The answer was obvious. Li Mu was the future empress. Li Mu and Zhang Chun walked out of the palace. Along the way, Zhang Chun did not speak. Li Mu thought that he was really frightened. Just as he was about to turn around, Zhang Chun suddenly looked at him with a face full of smiles and asked, "Your Majesty, no, Li Mu, to be honest, how do you think this official treats you?" Li Mu then said, "It's all right." "What do you mean by okay?" Zhang Chun looked displeased and said, "Back in Yangqiu County, I took good care of you. Now that you've come to the divine capital, you've caused so much trouble for me. Have I ever complained?" "Li Mu, you complain every time." "It's not important." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "You made a big mistake and offended someone you shouldn't have offended. When have I not cleaned up your mess behind your back? Touch your conscience and tell me, have I not treated you well?" Li Mu touched his conscience and thought carefully. He said, "Sir, you've been very good to me." This was the truth. If it were another superior, Li Mu would have been pushed out to take the blame the first time he caused trouble for him. Zhang Chun finally smiled and said, "If you become rich in the future, don't forget my kindness." Li Mu nodded and said, "Don't worry, I won't forget." Zhang Chun let out a long sigh of relief and muttered, "Whether or not this official can move to a bigger residence, whether or not I can have 8 maidservants to serve me, it all depends on you." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "What?" Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Nothing, we'll talk about this in the future." After parting with Li Mu, Zhang Chun did not return to the yamen. Instead, he went straight home. Mrs. Zhang was trimming the flowers in the yard. When she saw him coming in, she asked in confusion, "You're not going to the yamen today?" Zhang Chun said, "The morning court was delayed for an hour today. It's almost time for lunch. I'll go back to the yamen after lunch." Mrs. Zhang put down the scissors and said, "You must be tired after standing all morning. Go back to your room and rest for a while. I'll cook." Zhang Chun rolled up his sleeves and said, "I'll help you." Mrs. Zhang shook her head and said, "You'd better rest. The kitchen is so small that it can't accommodate 2 people." Zhang Chun held her hand and said, "Madam, you've suffered. I promise that I'll give you a bigger house in the future. At least 5 rooms. The kitchen must also be big. It won't be crowded for 10 people to stand." Mrs. Zhang patted his hand and said, "Such a big house is enough to live in. Many officials in the court don't even have their own houses." Zhang Chun smiled and said, "In short, madam, just wait and see. One day, I'll let you live in a bigger house. In the future, there will be maidservants to do the cooking and cleaning. You can be served comfortably by them." "Good, good, good. I'll wait for that day." Mrs. Zhang shook her head helplessly and said, "Let's not talk about this first. What do you plan to do about E?" Zhang Chun asked, "What's the matter with E?" Mrs. Zhang said, "E will be 20 next year. She hasn't found a husband yet. You're not worried, but I am. When I was her age, I was already pregnant with her." Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "What's the hurry? In the past, I didn't like any of the people who came to propose marriage. Now that we're in Luoyang, they don't like us," Mrs. Zhang said. "I think that Li Mu under you is not bad. He's handsome and..." "Shoo!" Before she could finish her words, Zhang Chun covered her mouth. Zhang Chun widened his eyes and looked at her in horror. He said, "Put away your bold idea. Don't mention this in the future. Don't even think about it." Today's morning court session was more than an hour later than usual. When it was dismissed, it was already close to noon. Many officials were like Zhang Chun. After leaving the palace, They did not return to the yamen. Instead, they chose to go home. Most of the officials in the court did not have their own houses in Luoyang. They lived in the government offices and made do with their 2 meals a day. There were also some officials who lived in the North Court, which was not far from the palace. They could have lunch at home. When the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel returned home, he locked himself in his study with a gloomy expression. The servants in the house did not know what happened. They only heard the sound of porcelain shattering in the study. They guessed that their master must have been angered during the morning court session. They did not dare to approach and only watched from afar. When the director of the Ministry of Justice returned home, he called his son to him and warned him sternly, "Be smart in the future. Don't provoke that Li Mu again. Otherwise, I'll break your legs and make you stay at home for the rest of your life." Yang Xiu shook his head and said, "I won't do it again. Even Minister Zhou died in his hands. I'm afraid he'll strike me with lightning." After saying that, he mustered up his courage and asked, "Did Li Mu do something big again?" The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "It's not just something big. He scolded all the officials in the court like they were his grandsons, but no one dared to talk back. People like him who don't care about their lives should stay as far away as possible from now on." The North Court, where the officials gathered, was usually quiet and secluded. However, at noon, angry curses could be heard from the various officials' mansions. "Damn it! There are so many officials in the court. Is he the only one who's clean? In order to get the Empress' favor, he doesn't even care about his face. How can there be such a shameless person in the world?" In the North Court, the servants in the various officials' mansions vaguely learned something from their master's angry words. They could not help but exclaim in surprise when they discussed it in private. They had lived in Luoyang for so long and worked in the official mansions. They often heard about the court affairs, but they had never heard of such a strange thing. In a restaurant somewhere in Luoyang, in the main hall, 2 guests were eating and chatting. "Have you heard? Something big happened in the court today." "How would a vegetable seller like you know about what happened in the court?" "I heard it from a servant in a high-ranking official's house. They just came out to purchase, so I casually eavesdropped on them. If you hear this, you'll definitely be shocked. Don't keep us in suspense. What happened? Hurry up and tell us." "Hee. I heard that someone scolded all the officials and even the academy during the morning court. He scolded the academy's students and instructors for being immoral. He pointed at the assistant minister of personnel's nose and scolded him for harboring his relatives. He scolded the officials from the 6 ministries and 9 temples for not teaching their children well. He also scolded the officials from the academy for forming cliques for personal gain. How can someone be so bold? Does he not want his head anymore? There really is someone who is so bold. Constable Li even scolded the heavens, let alone the people in the court. It's such a delightful thing. It's a pity that we didn't hear it with our own ears." "So it's Constable Li. Then it's not strange." Listening to the conversation between the two, the customers nearby could not help but slow down their speed of picking up food. Their eyes were filled with shock. When they first heard of this, everyone thought it was a groundless rumor. However, when they left the restaurant and realized that there were many people in the divine capital spreading the news, even those who did not believe it at first could not help but believe it a little. Although they only heard about it from the mouths of others, countless people could not suppress the surging passion in their hearts every time they imagined the scene in the morning court. The children of the officials bullied others and the people. They did whatever they wanted, but the people did not dare to speak up. The students of the academy committed serious crimes, but the academy shielded them and released them without charges. The people could only complain in their hearts. The officials in the court formed cliques for personal gain and fought for power. The court was in a mess and the people in the divine capital had no way of making a living. The people could only watch helplessly. It was not that they had nothing to say, but they did not dare and did not have the right to speak. Now, there was finally someone who had the right and was willing to speak up for them. This gave the people of the divine capital a glimmer of hope. Li Mu was the light of the divine capital. The Li residence. Li Mu was feeding Xiao by moves. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked outside. He felt an extremely powerful psyche power aura from the street in the distance. Chapter 248. That wave of psychokinesis was extremely powerful. Even from such a distance, Li Mu could clearly feel it. He walked out of the house and onto the main street, causing an uproar among the people of the divine capital. It's Constable Li. Constable Li is here. Li Mu was still confused. He didn't understand why there was so much psychokinesis targeting him from the people of the divine capital. Then, he realized that it must have something to do with his performance in the morning court. At that time, Li Mu didn't think so much. The scene in front of him could be considered a pleasant surprise. Every time he did something to win the hearts of the people in the divine capital, the psychokinesis of the people would reach a peak in a short time. Li Mu obviously wouldn't waste this rare opportunity. In the next half a day, he walked through the streets and alleys and walked through half of the divine capital. At night, when he returned home, Li Mu sat cross-legged on his bed with 2 pieces of spiritual jade in his hands. Under the urging of his psychokinesis, the spiritual power in his body circulated rapidly. The spiritual power in the 2 pieces of spiritual jade was instantly sucked dry and turned into powder. Li Mu didn't sleep the whole night and cultivated until dawn. There was already a lot of spiritual jade powder piled up in front of his bed. After a night of cultivation, Li Mu used up half of the spiritual jade that the Empress rewarded him last time. If he could obtain so much psychokinesis every day and have the support of a steady stream of spiritual jade, it wasn't impossible for him to reach the upper realm before the age of 30. Unfortunately, spiritual jade was hard to find and psychokinesis was even harder to obtain. Only the royal family could take the psychokinesis of the people of the Great Zhou and condense it into Emperor Qi to directly create a 7th realm powerhouse. Even so, this process would take at least 10 years or even decades. In terms of cultivation alone, Li Mu was very close to the peak of the Jushen realm. However, it wouldn't be easy to break through to the next realm. Some people reached the Jushen realm before the age of 30, but they couldn't achieve remarkable power in their lifetime. In addition to the accumulation of spiritual power, the breakthrough of a major realm also required opportunities. Without a doubt, Li Mu's opportunity was Lu Hanyan. Unfortunately, she was far away in the north region. The 2 of them were thousands of miles apart. However, even if there was a chance to break through now, Li Mu did not dare to touch it lightly. His mana was growing too fast, and his foundation was not stable. It was easy for his inner demons to invade him, and when he was advancing, it was the easiest time for the inner demons to invade him. Before he completely settled the woman in his dreams, Li Mu did not dare to try. Speaking of the woman in his dreams, she had not appeared for a long time. Although Mr. May had told him not to worry and to let nature take its course, Li Mu could not be at ease when it happened to him and was out of his control. It was a pity that he didn't have a chance to meet Her Majesty other than the morning court assembly. Otherwise, he could ask Her Majesty how to suppress and eliminate his inner demons. As a level 7 cultivator, this should be a simple matter for her. Although Li Mu had become an internal guard, he was still quite a distance away from becoming the Empress's personal guard. If he wanted to get more benefits from her, he first had to know what Her Majesty wanted. According to Mr. May, what Her Majesty wanted was the faith of the people in the Great Zhou. She wanted to gather the faith of the people in the Great Zhou's 36 counties and create the next Emperor's Qi as soon as possible. But according to Li Mu's understanding, the thing called Emperor's Qi by the royal family was actually the spirit of faith. It could allow an ordinary person to have the cultivation of the upper realm overnight. It could steal the fortune of heaven and earth and go against the heavens. The difficulty of this was obvious. This required 36 commoners to visit the state temple frequently, and after decades of accumulation, a strand of Emperor's Qi could be formed. The strand of Emperor's Qi that the Empress had was the accumulation of 2 generations of Zhou dynasty emperors for nearly half a century. Now, the Empress had only been on the throne for 3 years, and the next strand of Emperor's Qi was still far away. Li Mu still had a lot of doubts in his heart. As an upper realm cultivator, Her Majesty could do whatever she wanted. If she didn't want to be emperor, she could just not do it. With her strength, no one could force her, unless there was some secret that Li Mu didn't know. These weren't that important to Li Mu. He just needed to know that whatever Her Majesty wanted, he would give her. To obtain a continuous and stable faith of the people, as long as the people of the Great Zhou lived in peace and contentment, lived prosperous lives, and didn't have to worry about not having enough to eat, they would naturally be convinced by the imperial court and Her Majesty. This was simple to say, but extremely difficult to do. It was necessary to create a prosperous great Zhou to win the hearts of the people and shorten the time needed to condense the emperor's qi. This was a long-term thing that couldn't be done overnight. The most important thing now was to help Her Majesty get rid of the control of the 4 academies. For more than 100 years, the important officials of the imperial court had all come from the 4 academies, which led to the current situation of the imperial court. The imperial court urgently needed new blood. To change this situation, the imperial court could imitate the imperial examination and independently select talents from the 36 counties outside of the 4 academies. It even required the students of the 4 academies to pass the imperial court selection exam before they became officials, completely taking back the imperial court's power to select officials. Of course, it wasn't easy to completely change the situation of the imperial court. Jiangzhe's incident only damaged the reputation of the 100 Rivers Academy. Li Mu spoke bluntly in the Golden Palace, but the 4 academies wouldn't give up their power just because of Li Mu's words. The Empress and the 4 academies were in a state of balance. Although this world respected the strong, the imperial court's affairs could never be resolved simply by force, unless Her Majesty could break through to the 8th realm. If she could reach the 8th realm, disbanding the 4 academies would be just a matter of a word from her. There was no need to find any extra reasons. However, she couldn't do this at the moment. Jiangzhe obviously couldn't represent the entire 100 Rivers Academy, and it wasn't enough for Her Majesty to make a move on the 100 Rivers Academy, let alone the other academies. Li Mu couldn't find any other way to break through at the moment. He walked out of the house and prepared to patrol the areas that he didn't have time to patrol yesterday to absorb telekinesis. If he didn't need it for a while, he could store it in his body. In the imperial court, Li Mu found that the few censors of the censorate and a small number of officials in the imperial court had very thick telekinesis. They were all ordinary people who had never cultivated before. Once they started cultivating, this power of thought would allow them to break through several realms in a very short period of time. This speed was even faster than those unorthodox methods that could extract souls and steal souls. As he closed the door and prepared to leave, Li Mu found a carriage parked on the street in front of his house. A hand lifted the curtain of the carriage, and a face that Li Mu wasn't unfamiliar with appeared. When he saw Zhou Zhong, Li Mu's face darkened. He asked, "Assistant Minister Zhou, what brings you here?" Zhou Zhong said, "I'm just passing by and stopped to take a look." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "There's nothing to see here." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "I'm not here to see Constable Li. This mansion used to belong to a close friend of mine. I happened to pass by and couldn't help but think of him." Li Mu didn't say anything else and prepared to patrol. At this moment, Zhou Zhong suddenly said, "Do you think you can change anything by making a scene in the imperial court?" Li Mu asked, "What do you mean?" Zhou Zhong laughed mockingly and said, "The current situation in the imperial court has been stable for 100 years. Do you think you can shake the 100 Rivers Academy and force the other academies to give in by punishing Jiangzhe? The 3 academies have more than one Jiangzhe. Do you think you've changed anything? In fact, you haven't changed anything." After mocking Li Mu, Zhou Zhong lowered the curtain of the carriage and it slowly left. Li Mu's face was cold. He resisted the urge to strike him with the heavenly thunder of purple heaven. Indeed, it was satisfying to curse in the Golden Hall, but it couldn't solve any practical problems. Jiangzhe was just a special case. He could only represent himself, not the 100 Rivers Academy. Unless he could catch more Jiangzhe. Wait, what did Zhou Zhong mean when he said that the 3 academies had more than one Jiangzhe? Could it be that Jiangzhe wasn't a special case of the 100 Rivers Academy? Li Mu pondered for a while and gave up the idea of patrolling first. He went to the government office and walked into the duty room where the case files were kept. There weren't many files in the Luoyang government office. Before Li Mu and Zhang Chun came, the Luoyang government office was just a decoration. All the big and small cases in Luoyang were handled by the Ministry of Justice. Soon, Li Mu walked out of the government office and went straight to the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice. When the director of the Ministry of Justice heard the report, he ran out anxiously and asked, "What brings you here, Lord Li?" Li Mu smiled and said, "Lord Yang, I'd like to see the case files of the Ministry of Justice. Is that okay?" The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head like a rattledrum and said firmly, No, the Ministry of Justice has a rule that outsiders can't enter the case files of the Ministry of Justice." Li Mu said,
Then can I trouble Lord Yong to check it for me?
The director of the Ministry of Justice hesitated for a moment and asked, "What do you want to check?" Li Mu said, "Similar to Zhangzhi's case, all the case files related to the 4 major academies." The director of the Ministry of Justice immediately said, "No, the case files of the Ministry of Justice were all made by me. Except for Zhangzhi's case, there are no cases related to the 4 major academies." The director of the Ministry of Justice didn't seem to be lying. Li Mu thought carefully. It wasn't that there were no cases related to the 4 major academies, but that the Ministry of Justice didn't dare to accept them. Li Mu smiled at the director of the Ministry of Justice and said, "Most of the cases in the Ministry of Justice are handled by Lord Yang. Even if there are no files, Lord Yang should know something about them." The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head and said, "There really isn't." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Lord Yang, you've been working hard on the cases." The next morning at the court, "I'll definitely put in a good word for you in front of all the officials and His Majesty." The director of the Ministry of Justice's heart skipped a beat and cold sweat broke out on his back. This was a threat. This was a naked threat. Li Mu was good at scolding people, but how could he put in a good word? If he was scolded in front of all the officials and His Majesty like the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, how could he have the face to stay in the officialdom in the future? Li Mu asked again, "I'll ask one last time. Do you have any cases related to the 4 major academies?" The director of the Ministry of Justice swallowed and said, "Yes, we do." Chapter 249. After a while, the director of the Ministry of Justice sent Li Mu off with a smile. He waved his hand and said, "Take care, Lord Li." After sending off Li Mu, the director of the Ministry of Justice returned to his office. He slumped into his chair and sighed, "Why is my life so hard?" As an official of the Ministry of Justice, he was bullied by a constable of the divine capital. He was probably the most wronged director in the history of the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu left the Ministry of Justice and returned to the divine capital. He said to the constables who had just returned from their patrol and were sunbathing in the courtyard, "Come with me. We have work to do." Divine Capital. Rosy Lane. There were more than 100 markets in the divine capital. There were business markets, entertainment markets, and residential markets. Rosy Lane was a residential area in the western part of the divine capital. Although it was not comparable to the markets where the southern courtyard and northern courtyard lived, it was still considered prosperous among the hundreds of markets in the divine capital. Most of the people who lived in Rosy Lane were wealthy. Most of the houses in the market had 2 or 3 courtyards. Li Mu came to a house. Wang Wu looked up at the 2 words Su Mansion on the plaque. Without waiting for Li Mu's order, he went up and knocked on the door. After a long time, slow footsteps came from inside. An old man with a wrinkled face opened the door and asked, "Sirs, what's the matter?" Li Mu went up and said, "We're from the divine capital. We're investigating a case and need your cooperation." The old servant opened the door and said, "Sirs, please come in. I'll get the master." Li Mu and the others walked into the courtyard, and the old man walked into a room. Soon, a middle-aged man walked out of the room with quick steps. The middle-aged man looked at them in surprise and asked, What case are you investigating?" Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "You're shopkeeper Su, right?" The middle-aged man nodded and said, "That's me." Li Mu continued asking, 3 months ago, was shopkeeper Su's daughter violated?" When the middle-aged man heard this, his face was filled with grief and indignation. His voice was hoarse as he said, "We have already decided not to sue you. Why are you still unwilling to let us go?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Shopkeeper Su, you've misunderstood. We're really here to investigate this case. If you've really been wronged, the Imperial Court will give you justice." The middle-aged man's face was filled with fear. He shook his head and said, "There is no injustice. My daughter is fine. You can go." The middle-aged man clearly did not trust them. Li Mu sighed and said, "Shopkeeper Su, my name is Li Mu. I'm from the divine capital. You can trust us." The middle-aged man raised his head abruptly and asked, "Luoyang Yaman, you're Arrestor Li?" Li Mu took out his waist tag. His name and position were clearly engraved on it. The middle-aged man stared blankly at the token in Li Mu's hand. Even if he stayed in his house and never left, he had still heard of Li Mu's name. When the master's servants went out to buy things, they would often bring back news about Li Mu. For example, he had violently beaten up the sons of officials who bullied the people in Luoyang and forced the imperial court to change the punishment law. Another example was when he struck the people in the street with lightning to seek justice for the victims. He scolded all the officials in the imperial court, and even the 4 academies were not spared. He was not afraid of the nobles or the academies. In Luoyang, he was the light in the hearts of the people. The middle-aged man's body trembled as he knelt heavily on the ground. He nodded and said mournfully, "Sir Li, please seek justice for me." Li Mu helped him up and said, "Don't be agitated. Tell me in detail what happened. I'll seek justice for you." 2 lines of tears rolled down from the middle-aged man's eyes. He said in a trembling voice, "Wei Bin, a student of the Baichuan Academy, humiliated my daughter and almost caused her to commit suicide. I went to the Ministry of Justice to complain, but they dismissed me with insufficient evidence. After that, someone even warned me that if I didn't know what was good for me and dared to complain again, they would destroy my family and make me die without a complete corpse. Damn it, there's such a thing. Damn the Ministry of Justice. It's a disaster in Luoyang. Why are these academies filled with beasts?" The constables behind Li Mu were indignant. Li Mu looked at shopkeeper Su and said, "Can I see Miss Su?" Shopkeeper Su nodded and said, "I'll bring Constable Li over. However, after my daughter was humiliated by that beast, she tried to commit suicide several times. Now her mind is not clear and she's afraid of outsiders, especially men." Li Mu looked at the people behind him and said, "Wait for me here." Under shopkeeper Su's lead, Li Mu passed through a moon gate and arrived at the inner courtyard. The scene in the courtyard was a little strange. There was an old tree in the courtyard and its trunk was wrapped in a cotton quilt. The well in the corner was also covered by a stone slab. The stone slab was also wrapped in a thick cotton quilt. Even the stone tables and benches in the courtyard were wrapped in cotton and other things. There was a woman sitting by the stone table. The woman was about 18 or 19 years old. She was wearing a plain dress. Her clothes were neat but a little messy. Her hair was loose and her face was a little dull. Her eyes were empty. When she heard someone approaching, her face was immediately filled with fear. She covered her head with both hands and screamed, "Don't come here! Don't come here!" Shopkeeper Su clenched his fists. His face was full of sorrow and his body could not stop trembling. Li Mu did not approach the woman. He retreated to the outer courtyard and took out a few fu lu. He handed it to shopkeeper Su and said, "This talisman can calm the mind. Before going to bed at night, turn it into talisman water and let her drink it. Her condition should be better." Shopkeeper Su drank the talisman water and said repeatedly, "Thank you, Constable Li. Thank you." The only thing Li Mu could do was to calm her mind. Being violated and humiliated had obviously caused great damage to her soul and even affected her mind. She could only rely on her own strength to get over it. The best way for her to get over the knot in her heart was to let her see with her own eyes that those who violated and humiliated her received the retribution they deserved. 100 Rivers Academy, Wei Bin. Li Mu's face darkened as he walked out of the Su mansion. He said, "Let's go to 100 Rivers Academy." Wang Wu and the others followed him without hesitation. They used to be afraid of the academy, but after Jiangzhe's incident, the academy's weight in their hearts had lessened a lot. 100 Rivers Academy. When Li Mu walked to the gate of the academy, the old gatekeeper appeared again. He looked at him angrily and asked, "What are you doing here again?" Li Mu said calmly, "Ask Wei Bin to come out. He's involved in a case and needs to go back with us to the Yamen for investigation." If it was in the past, the old man would not care about a constable of the divine capital Yamen. However, after Jiangzhe's incident, he deeply realized the consequences of ignoring him. He was only a gatekeeper of the academy. This kind of thing should be left to the person in charge of the academy. He glanced at Li Mu and said, "Wait here. I'll go in and report." With that, his figure disappeared into the academy gate. Li Mu and the others stood at the entrance of the academy in their official uniforms. They were particularly eye-catching. Soon some commoners came up and asked, "Constable Li, what's going on? Did a student of the academy commit a crime again?" Li Mu said, "A student of 100 Rivers Academy defiled a woman." We're going to arrest him. What? A student of the academy again? How can a student of the academy do such a dirty thing? They're reading books of sages, but they're worse than beasts. What did the instructors of the academy teach them? The commoners gathered around Li Mu and the others and discussed animatedly. Inside the academy, Vice Principal Chen frowned tightly. He asked in a deep voice, "Whose student is Wei Bin?" A middle-aged man stood out from the group of instructors in front of him and said nervously, "He's my student." Vice Principal Chen asked, "What crime did he commit that the Divine Capital Yamen would come to the academy to arrest him?" The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "I don't know either." Vice Principal Chen snorted and said, "No matter what crime he committed, the Divine Capital Yamen wants him. Let them take him away and punish him accordingly. In the future, the academy is not allowed to interfere with the matters of the students." The middle-aged man thought for a while and asked, "But won't this damage the academy's reputation?" "What reputation does the academy have?" Vice Principal Chen waved his hand and said, "His Majesty is still worried about finding a reason to attack the academy. Don't give them any chance. If he wants Wei Bin, give him Wei Bin." Li Mu and the others didn't have to wait for long outside before a young man with a pale face and trembling body was brought out of the academy. A middle-aged man said, "No matter what crime he committed, please punish him impartially. The academy will not protect him." His righteous words improved the impression of the commoners in front of the academy. A student's mistake could not be blamed on the academy. If the academy could uphold justice and not protect him, it could be considered righteous. Li Mu glanced at the young man and said coldly, "Take him away." Wang Wu and the others immediately took him to the Divine Capital Yamen. At the Wei Mansion. "Big brother, bad news. Bad news." The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue finished his meal and was about to go to the Yamen when a figure suddenly rushed into his study with a face full of panic. Looking at his brother, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue asked, "What happened?" The man panted and said, Wei Bin was arrested and brought to the Divine Capital Yamen." "What?" The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue had high hopes for his nephew who was studying at the Baichuan Academy. He hurriedly asked, "What crime did he commit? Why was he arrested and brought to the Divine Capital Yamen?" The man lowered his head and said, He once raped a girl. Now it's exposed and the Divine Capital Yamen knows about it." "Fool!" The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue said angrily, "Why did you only tell me about this now?" The man said worriedly, "Big brother, what do we do now? He already knows his mistake. The Divine Capital Yamen won't sentence him to death, right? I'm not very clear about the law. I'll go ask Panger." The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue walked out of the study and into another courtyard. In the middle of the courtyard, Wei Peng was bent over a stone table, reading. Hearing the noise, he turned his head and asked, "Father's second uncle, is there something you need from me?" The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue said, "Panger, you're familiar with the law. What's the sentence for raping a girl?" Wei Peng was stunned and asked, "Why are you suddenly asking this? Did second uncle rape a girl?" The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue said, "Don't ask too much. What's the sentence for raping a girl?" Wei Peng looked at his second uncle with a strange gaze and said, "Raping a girl is a serious crime. According to the law of the Great Zhou, Book 2, Article 36, those who commit the crime of rape are usually sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. In serious cases, the highest sentence is execution." The man hurriedly asked, "What's considered serious?" Wei Peng shook his head and said, "If the method of rape is too cruel, such as raping the same girl over a long period of time, raping a pregnant girl, a seriously ill girl, or in public, or causing serious injury to a girl, these are all serious cases." The man let out a sigh of relief but still asked worriedly, "What do we do? If that's the case, won't Bin be in prison for more than 3 years?" Wei Peng was shocked and said, "Wei Bin was the one who raped the girl?" The man looked at Wei Peng and a glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes. He said, "Panger, you know the law. You have to help your brother. Even if you can't get him off the hook, you have to make sure he doesn't spend too many years in prison." Wei Peng thought about it and nodded helplessly. "I'll try my best." Chapter 250. Wang Wu and the other two constables escorted Wei Bin all the way to the Luoyang Yamen under the watchful eyes of the people. Li Mu searched both the front and back of the Yamen but still could not find Zhang Chun.
He asked Deputy Constable Sun, "Where's Lord Zhang?"
Deputy Constable Sun said, "I think he went out for some business." Without the Luoyang medallion, Li Mu did not have the authority to investigate the case. He did not know when Zhang Chun would return. Li Mu thought for a while and said to Wang Wu and the others, "Go to the Ministry of Justice. All criminal cases in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou, including the Luoyang, were under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice even had the authority to interfere with local trials. This case was already a hot potato, so it was perfect to leave it to the Ministry of Justice. It did not matter if they were officials or citizens of the Great Zhou. As long as they lived in the Great Zhou, they had the authority to send someone to the authorities, including the Luoyang Yamen and the Ministry of Justice. If the Ministry of Justice did not accept the case, Li Mu, as the censor, would have something to do in the next morning court. The Ministry of Justice. The director of the Ministry of Justice had just rested when a constable knocked on the door and walked in.
He said with a bitter face, "Sir, Li Mu is here again."
The director of the Ministry of Justice's head buzzed. He grabbed his hair and said in frustration, "Didn't I tell him? Why is he here again? How can he bully people like this?" The constable said. "He caught a student from the academy." The director of the Ministry of Justice felt his head swell. He was about to sneak out from the back door when Li Mu appeared in his sight. He said with grief and indignation, "Sir Li, didn't we agree to take him to the Luoyang Yamen?" Li Mu looked at him, sighed and said, "Lord Yang, you are so silly. I gave you this opportunity because of our friendship in the past. If you don't want it, you can't blame me for what happens next." Their past friendship was **T. The director of the Ministry of Justice cursed in his heart but still asked, "Sir Li, what do you mean?" Li Mu said, "According to the victim of this case, he complained to the Ministry of Justice as soon as the case happened. However, not only did the Ministry of Justice not accept the case, you dismissed him with the excuse of insufficient evidence. After the case, you even threatened his family, saying that if he sued you again, you would kill him." The director hurriedly said, "The Ministry of Justice did not threaten him. The Ministry of Justice never do such things." "Who would believe that?" Li Mu looked at him with great pity and said, "This case has attracted widespread attention of the people. People will only think that all this was done by the Ministry of Justice. In the end, this matter will become more and more serious, and the consequences will become more and more serious. Do you think you can escape from it, Lord Yang? When the time comes, who do you think will be pushed out by the Ministry of Justice to take the blame? Who do you think will be the minister, the assistant minister, or you, official Yang? I'm giving you a chance to make up for your mistakes on account of your help. If you don't want it, I'll bring him back to the fairies' capital." Wait! Under Li Mu's persuasion, the director of the Ministry of Justice had understood and hurriedly spoke. Li Mu had completely enlightened him. Once the case became big, the Ministry of Justice would be held responsible. The position of the director of the Ministry of Justice was neither big nor small. It was just right for him to take the blame. If he did not do something to make up for it, he would most likely lose his position. He might even be imprisoned. He clasped his fists to Li Mu and said, "Sir Li, thank you for reminding me. I will remember your kindness." "You're welcome," Li Mu nodded and said. "In that case, let's start the trial as soon as possible." The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the office and saw Zhou Zhong coming out from the opposite side. He asked nervously, "Sir Zhou, the academy student committed a crime. Do you want to interrogate him yourself?" Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "Go ahead. I'll just listen." His gaze swept past Li Mu and then left calmly. There was a commotion in the front yard of the Ministry of Justice. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Bin's father, and Wei Peng had just arrived from the Luoyang Yamen. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue saw the Director of the Ministry of Justice and immediately said, "Sir Yang, please wait." The Director of the Ministry of Justice turned and asked, "Sir Wei, why are you here?" The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue sighed and said, "Wei Bin is my nephew." The Director of the Ministry of Justice was surprised. Then he shook his head and said, "If Sir Wei is here to plead for Wei Bin, then I'm sorry. This case has attracted a lot of attention. I can't be biased. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue shook his head and said, Of course not. Wei Bin is guilty. I just want to listen. The Director of the Ministry of Justice nodded and said, Yes, but Sir Wei's identity is special. You can only listen outside the court. The Minister-Counselor clasped his fists and said, Thank you, Sir Yang. Then he said, Can we have a few words with Wei Bin? The Director of the Ministry of Justice hesitated and said, At this moment, Zhou Zhong said from afar, Don't take more than half an hour. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue was grateful and said, Thank you, Sir Zhou. The three of them walked to Wei Bin's side. Wei Bin's face was pale and he said in panic, Uncle Father, save me! The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue was angry and said, Bastard, I didn't send you to the academy to rape women. Now you know fear. Why didn't you know when you were doing evil? Wei Bin's father hurriedly said, Now is not the time to talk about this. Bin, from now on, remember every word your brother says. Later in the court, you will do as your brother says. That way, you will receive the lightest punishment. Wei Bin nodded and said, I will not speak carelessly. Wei Peng looked at him and asked, Did you really do this? Wei Bin nodded and said, It was me. Wei Peng asked again, Did you use violence during the process? Wei Bin shook his head and said, No, we only started after she was unconscious. Wei Peng was stunned and asked, We? Wei Bin said, I wasn't the only one who did this. Wei Peng thought for a while and said, Got it? Later, no matter what the sir asks, as long as you did it, just admit it. If you confess, you can fight for a reduced sentence. After that, you can confess to all the people who committed the crime with you. This can be considered a meritorious service. It is very likely that your sentence will be reduced to less than 3 years. After a while, the Director of the Ministry of Justice walked forward and asked, Are you done? The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue said, I'm done. Thank you, Sir Yang. The Director of the Ministry of Justice walked to the court and asked for instructions from the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Justice. He said in a low voice, Begin the court. Wei Bin was brought to the court. The Director of the Ministry of Justice sat at the top. Li Mu and the Minister-Counselor sat on his left and right to listen to the trial. The Director of the Ministry of Justice patted the gavel and said, Men, summon the Sioux woman to the court. Li Mu raised his head and said, Sir Yang, the Sioux woman has been defiled by Wei Bin. Her body and mind have been injured. She is afraid of seeing strangers and is not suitable to be brought to the court. Directly interrogating Wei Bin is enough. The Director of the Ministry of Justice thought for a while and nodded. Sir Li is very considerate. He patted the gavel again and looked at Wei Bin. He asked, Wei Bin, do you admit your crime? Your student admits his crime. Wei Bin immediately knelt down and spilled the beans. 3 months ago, on the night of the 6th day of the 2nd lunar month, your student tricked Su Yao to an inn and drugged her, then violated her. The Director of the Ministry of Justice was stunned. He did not expect Wei Bin to confess so quickly. He did not even ask anything and Wei Bin had already confessed everything. He quickly recovered and said, Since you have confessed, then according to the 36th article of the 2nd book of the Law of Great Zhou, the punishment for raping a woman is between 3 and 10 years in prison. That woman was injured physically and mentally because of your rape. I now sentence you to 7 years in prison. Your Excellency, please wait. Wei Peng stood outside the court and loudly said, Although Wei Bin is guilty, he did not use violence or coercion. Moreover, he confessed his crime on his own initiative. According to the law, Your Excellency should be given a lighter sentence. The Director of the Ministry of Justice frowned. Do I need you to teach me how to judge a case? If you dare to disturb my judgment again, you will be punished for disturbing the court. At this moment, the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong, calmly said, Although Wei Bin is a criminal, he still has the right to defend himself. Wei Peng, if you have anything else to say to defend Wei Bin, come to the court and say it. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue looked at the Assistant Minister of Justice with a grateful expression. He pushed Wei Peng and said, Why aren't you going up? Wei Peng walked up to the court and raised his head. Apart from rape, Wei Bin's actions did not cause any other serious consequences. According to the law, he should be given a lighter sentence. The Director of the Ministry of Justice glanced at Zhou Zhong. Seeing that he did not say anything, he felt somewhat uncertain. He then looked at Li Mu. Seeing that his expression was also calm, he finally decided to act according to the law. He did not favor Wei Bin, nor did he intentionally increase his punishment. If he acted according to the law, no one could blame him, right? The director of the Ministry of Justice cleared his throat and looked at Wei Peng. What you say makes sense. In view of Wei Bin's voluntary confession, I will give you a lighter sentence and sentence you to 5 years in prison. Outside the court, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue and Wei Bin's father let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, Wei Peng struck while the iron was hot. Sir, please wait. There are still some hidden facts to this case. Wei Bin has already confessed that apart from him, there were also the 100 River Academies Jiang Jie, Ji Yun, Song Zhou, and Yi Kong. According to the laws of the Great Zhou, the main culprit exposing the accomplices is a great merit and can be reduced or exempted from punishment. Although the crime of rape cannot be exempted, it can be reduced by at least 3 years. Hearing this, the director of the Ministry of Justice was stunned. This Wei Peng seemed to be very familiar with the law, but did he not know the difference between rape and rape? Rape of a woman was generally punished with 3 to 10 years in prison. Rape of a woman was extremely vile. The main culprit would be sentenced to at least the death penalty and could not be reduced. This law had been amended by Assistant Minister Zhou 5 years ago. Could it be that Wei Peng was looking at the unamended law of the Great Zhou from 5 years ago? Li Mu left his chair and walked up to the court. Under Wei Peng's somewhat frightened gaze, he patted his shoulder and said, "Listen to my advice. In the future, if there's nothing important, don't contact your second uncle's family." Chapter 251. Wei Peng looked at Li Mu in confusion, not knowing what was going on. The director of the Ministry of Justice came back to his senses and looked at Wei Bin again. He asked, "Are you saying that other than you, there was someone else who raped the girl that night? Did you gang rape her?" The sentence had been reduced from 7 years to 5 years. Wei Bin nodded repeatedly and said, "There was also Jiang Jie, Ji Yun, Song Zhou, and Yi Kong. There were 5 of us." The director of the Ministry of Justice rubbed his forehead and began to realize the seriousness of the matter. Gang rape with more than 2 people had already exceeded the limit of a 10-year sentence. Gang rape with 5 people was the worst type of crime. It was unpardonable, and there was no doubt that the main culprit would be sentenced to death. Even the important accomplices would not be able to escape death. It was nothing more than sentencing Wei Bin to death. Among all the death sentences, death by beheading was undoubtedly the lightest. Worse than death by beheading, there were also dismemberment by 5 horses, death by 1,000 cuts, and even torture against the soul. Just thinking about it made one shudder. Wei Bin was a member of the academy after all. He did not know what to do. He looked at the assistant director of the Ministry of Justice and gave him a questioning look. Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "Just sentence it as it should be." The director of the Ministry of Justice took a deep breath and looked at Wei Bin again. He asked, "Who came up with the idea of gang raping the girl?" Wei Bin said, "It was Jiang Jie." The director of the Ministry of Justice continued to ask, "Who tricked the girl into going to the inn?" Wei Bin said, "It was me. It was Ji Yun who drugged her." "Sir, I've already confessed. Can I not go to jail?" The director of the Ministry of Justice sighed and said, "You don't have to go to jail." Wei Bin's face lit up with ecstasy. "Really?" Wei Bin's father also looked happy. As an official, the director of the Ministry of Revenue instinctively felt that something was wrong. Wei Peng's face was full of disbelief. Once a woman was raped, there was no way to escape punishment. How could Wei Bin not have to go to jail? At this moment, the director of the Ministry of Justice continued, "According to the 36th article of the 2nd volume of the Law of Great Zhou, Wei Bin, Jiang Jie, and Ji Yun, as the main culprits of the gang rape case, are sentenced to death. The others ought to be sent back to the yamen for trial." Wei Bin was stunned for a moment, and the smile on his face froze. He suspected that he had heard wrongly. His sentence had clearly been reduced from 7 years to 5 years. How did it suddenly become a death sentence? Wei Bin's father rushed to the court and said in shock, "Lord, how could this be? You can't judge him like this." You can't judge him like this, Wei Peng cried out loudly. My lord, this is against the law. The director of the Ministry of Justice ordered one of the bailiffs. Show him the law of Great Zhou from our yamen. The bailiff left the court and soon came back with a thick book and handed it to Wei Peng. As soon as he held the book, Wei Peng felt that it was completely different from the law of Great Zhou that he had been reading these days. This book was slightly heavier and thicker than the ones he had been reading. The pages also looked like they needed to be updated. The pages of his law of Great Zhou were already yellowed. He skillfully flipped to the second volume, and sure enough, he found an additional explanation after that law. Under the crime of rape, if there were 2 or more people taking turns, the punishment would be severe. If there were 5 or more people taking turns, the main offender and important accomplices would be executed at the very least. Wei Peng's body trembled, and the law of Great Zhou in his hand fell to the ground. All this time, he had been studying the outdated law, forgetting to eat and sleep. His face was filled with grief and indignation as he lamented, Yang Xiu has wronged me. Li Mu returned to his position. At this point in the investigation, Wei Bin, Jiang Jie, and the other 2 could not escape death. Even if Wei Bin was willing to plead guilty, it could not change this fact. Whether he was willing to plead guilty or not, the Ministry of Justice could easily obtain the complete truth from him. Apart from Wei Bin and Jiang Jie, there were 3 more people from the 100 Rivers Academy that needed to be arrested. Li Mu walked to the director of the Ministry of Justice and said, There are 3 more criminals from the 100 Rivers Academy. I know that Lord Yang is afraid of the Academy. My divine capital Yamen will help you capture this person. What do you think, Lord Yang? The director of the Ministry of Justice was worried about this matter. When he heard this, he said happily, That's naturally the best. Li Mu walked past Wei Bin and the others and strode out of the Ministry of Justice. He said to Wang Wu and the others who were waiting outside, Let's go back to the 100 Rivers Academy. The group of people returned to the 100 Rivers Academy from the Ministry of Justice. Along the way, they were surrounded by people. Bastards! The Academy has taught a bunch of bastards. Calling them bastards is an insult to bastards. They are worse than bastards. What's the point of an academy like this existing? It's better to disband it. After learning about the atrocities of the Academy's students from Wang Wu and the others, the crowd was immediately enraged. They rushed toward the 100 Rivers Academy in a mighty manner. The higher the Academy's status in the hearts of the people, the worse the fall would be when they fell from the altar. You have to bear the consequences of your own mistakes. Ji Yun, Song Zhou, and Yi Tsong were sent out with their hands tied behind their backs. This time, the people of the 100 Rivers Academy did not say anything. Not long after, in the Ministry of Justice's court. Apart from Jiang Zhe, who was already in the Ministry of Justice's prison, Ji Yun, Song Zhou, Yi Tsong, and Wei Bin were all kneeling in front of the court. Damn you, Wei Bin! Didn't you say you wouldn't rat us out? If I knew this day would come, I wouldn't have believed you. You can't escape, so you want to drag us down with you. Ji Yun, Song Zhou, and Yi Tsong looked at Wei Bin, who was kneeling in a daze in the court. It was as if his soul had left his body. Wei Bin's eyes were lifeless. He knelt there in a daze, as if his soul had been taken away. Wei Peng's reaction was not any better. He stood outside the court with a blank expression. Initially, the Minister of Justice had already sentenced Wei Bin to 7 years of imprisonment. Wei Bin only needed to lose 7 years of freedom, and after he was released, he would still be able to enjoy a luxurious life. However, after his defense, Wei Bin's 7 years of imprisonment was turned into a death sentence. He had no idea how to face his uncle's family. Wei Bin's father was on the verge of collapsing. He shook Wei Peng's shoulder and said, "Give me back my son, give me back my son." Many people no longer harped on Wei Peng's past bullying of the people. They regarded him as a role model for playboys in Luoyang. Outside the east gate of Luoyang, the director of the Ministry of Justice grabbed a few sticks from the pot and threw them out. He said in a deep voice, "The time has come. Carry out the execution." The executioner raised his broadsword. With a flash, the heads of Wei Bin, Jiang Jie, and Ji Yun fell to the ground. Their souls scattered. Beside Li Mu, a woman with a dazed face looked at the three rolling heads. She suddenly burst into tears. She cried heartbrokenly. Shopkeeper Su hugged her. The man could not help but cry out as well.
He comforted her. My poor Yao Yao.
It's okay. It's okay. The villains who harmed you are all dead. They're all dead. Seeing her cry so sadly, Li Mu was relieved. She was humiliated by Wei Bin and the others. Her mind was badly damaged and she had sealed her heart. No fulu or elixir could cure her. That was why Li Mu asked shopkeeper Su to bring her here to watch the execution. When she saw the three people being executed, the knot in her heart was untied. Shopkeeper Su pulled her to kneel on the ground and kowtowed 3 times. He said gratefully, Constable Li, I can't repay your kindness.
If you have any orders in the future, I'll do it even if I have to go through a mountain of swords or a sea of fire.
The woman also cried, Thank you, Constable Li, for upholding justice for me. Li Mu helped them up and said, You're welcome. It's my duty. What do you plan to do next? Shopkeeper Su said, I want to send Yao Yao to her grandmother's house and let her rest for a few days. Li Mu thought about it and said, That's fine. After all, Luoyang had left too many painful memories for her. A temporary change of environment would be good for her recovery. They did not have to worry about the revenge of the academy or the Wei family. This case was different from the case of Xiao Yu in Yang County. Wei Bin's case had attracted too much attention in Luoyang. The academy and the Wei family had better pray that nothing happened to them. Once something happened to the father and daughter of the Su family, even if it was not their fault, everyone would blame them. After returning from the execution ground, Li Mu opened the door. Xiao Bai ran out of the kitchen wearing an apron and said, Benefactor, please wait a moment. The food will be ready soon. Seeing the bloody scene on the execution ground, Li Mu still felt depressed when he came back. However, when he saw Xiao Bai's smiling face, his depression disappeared without a trace. Li Mu walked into the kitchen and said, Let me do the rest. After dinner, I'll teach you Taoism. After the demon clan transformed, they could learn the Taoism and Abhijna of the human clan. In addition to their strong bodies, they could often suppress human cultivators if their Dharma powers were not too different. Xiao Bai had already transformed for some time. She had an endless supply of spiritual jades for cultivation, and her Dharma powers were growing rapidly. It would not be long before she grew a 4th tail and condensed a demon pill. Li Mu knew that he was the only person Xiao Bai could rely on now. He had never been stingy when it came to Xiao Bai. Whether it was defensive or offensive Dharma treasures, she had the best. She even had a lot of powerful earth-rank Fulu. She had an endless supply of spiritual jades for cultivation. Li Mu had also taught her the Buddhist incantation of 9 words. Now, she looked like a 3-tailed spiritual fox. However, in a real fight, she could suppress a 4-tailed demon fox and a 4th realm human cultivator. Even if Li Mu was not by her side, she could still protect herself to a certain extent. Of course, in Li Mu's eyes, this was far from enough.
Putting aside the fact that she still had to avenge her grandmother and her entire clan, in order to stand firmly behind the Empress, he had already offended all the people and forces that he could and could not afford to offend in the deity's capital.
Even if he was being targeted now, he still could not figure out who was behind it. The 6 ministries and 9 temples, the academy, the Zhou family, the Shao clan. It was all possible. They could not find a way to break through Li Mu. It was inevitable that they would attack those around him. Especially what Li Mu was about to do next, it would completely offend the academy. He did not care about himself, but he had to consider Xiao Bai's safety. After tomorrow's morning court, he planned to ask the Empress for a heaven-rank Fulu for protection. If the Empress did not give it to him, Li Mu would have to reconsider their relationship. He had offended so many people for her and was in great danger. As Li Mu's only backer, if she did not even care about Li Mu's safety, then it would be difficult for him to work for her in the future. In my opinion, we should expose the dirty deeds of their academies and let everyone see. Stupid! Vice Principal Chen glanced at him and said, "Can't you see that this is Her Majesty's intention? She has long been dissatisfied with the officials from the Great Zhou leaving the academy. If we drag Clear Sky Academy and Myriad Scroll Academy down, won't it give Her Majesty a good reason?" The other instructors heard this and came to a realization. The four academies had always been on the same side when it came to selecting officials for the imperial court. If the four academies were the first to have internal strife, then the one who would be the happiest would be the Empress, who had long wanted to deal with the academy. No matter if it was Baichuan Academy, Clear Sky Academy, or Myriad Scroll Academy, the Empress wanted to see any of them fall. What she wanted to see more was the four academies killing each other. Fortunately, Vice Principal Chen reminded them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have thought of this. "I didn't expect a woman like Her Majesty to be so scheming. She wants to sit by and watch the academies fight amongst themselves.
Her intentions are sinister. We can't let her succeed."
Vice Principal Chen let out a long sigh and said, "The academies have existed for so long, and there are indeed many problems that have arisen internally.
This wasn't the academy's intention.
The academies can slowly correct these problems, but if Her Majesty takes the opportunity to interfere and change the structure of the imperial court, I'm afraid that in a few decades, the four academies will only exist in name." One of the instructors said worriedly, "Clear Sky Academy and Myriad Scroll Academy aren't much better than Baichuan Academy. It's very easy for them to find out about the dirty deeds their students have done. I'm afraid that even if we don't do anything, someone else will." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man guarding the entrance of Baichuan Academy hurriedly ran in and said, "Principal, bad news. Li Mu is here again." Li Mu asked Wang Wu and the others to set up a table in a shady corner at the entrance of Baichuan Academy. There was a brush and ink placed on the table.
He moved a chair over and sat down behind the desk with a grand air of grandeur.
Several instructors walked out of Baichuan Academy. The leader angrily scolded, "What are you doing here again?" Li Mu turned around and put his arm on the chair. He said, "In order to clean up the unhealthy practices in Luoyang and return the people a clear sky, the Luoyang government has started a street activity. From today onwards, if the people want to report a case, they don't have to go to the government office. They just have to do it here." The instructor said, "If you want to do it somewhere else. This is the academy, not the Luoyang government's place."